So welcome, everybody. We are here at Town Council Chambers on Tuesday, October 3rd for Town Council meeting number 22-23. I'll call the meeting to order and call a roll with us tonight. We have Councilor Pillsbury.
Present.
Councilor Fournier.
Here.
Councilor Lawrence.
Here.
Councilor Bradley.
Here.
Councilor Egan.
Here.
And Chair Pilch is here, and Councilor Daniele is excused for some travel tonight. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up, we need to approve minutes from our last meeting, which was number 20-23, held on September 19th. So I would offer a motion to waive the reading of those minutes and accept them as printed.
Seconded.
Seconded by Councilor Lawrence. Thank you. Any discussion about the minutes? All in favor of approving?
Aye.
Opposed? That's 6-0. Thanks. Normally, I would have some announcements tonight, and I have only one so far, which is that they're replacing the railroad bridge, or the bridge over the railroad on Lower Main Street, and the Maine Department of Transportation is offering a public notice meeting, or a public meeting, to describe what they're doing and gather any local input. That meeting will be on October October 16th. Public meeting on October 16th. It's a virtual meeting, so you would log onto a website and they'll do a virtual presentation with a description of the bridge and ask for any input, which I think you can also submit by email after the meeting. So that's on the Maine Department of Transportation website. That's the only announcement I have for tonight. Anybody else have any announcements? Seeing none, move on to information exchange. The time for councilors to exchange information with each other and the public. Councilor Bradley.
I have two. First, that the Freeport High School golf team is participating Friday in the state championship game, and I wish to wish them luck and want us all to wish them luck, because that's an amazing accomplishment for a small town like ours. The second is that the town went through a process recently with respect to the downtown visioning and project review board consideration of a proposal for 22 Main Street. And it ended with sort of a mixed decision by the town. One ordinance committee approved it, another didn't, but it also ended in the decision by the developer not to develop the project. And that left 22 Main Street as sort of an empty parcel very close to Town Hall, with a lot of people thinking about different reasons or uses for it. A small group of us, soon after that determination that the developer was no longer interested in developing, went to Mosier and suggested to them that we would present to the town council a proposal for the purchase of it under certain circumstances. The conversation is going on. I don't know whether it's productive or it's not, but I was starting to feel uncomfortable that it was going on without saying something to the council about it. So that's all I'm doing, is telling you that that conversation's going on. There's a proposal in front of Mosier. It's about a week old. It could be accepted. It could be modified. If anything comes out of it, we'll bring it back to the council for your consideration and review. And the group of people who are doing this are Sue Nurse, Ford Reike, and myself. And that's not to preclude anyone else who has any interest in this, but that just seemed effective and efficient to do it that way.
Any other information exchange items? Councilor Egan?
I just want to highlight that on Friday, the 22nd of September, we had a a rally outside Town Hall here. And it was community voices. It was a chance for people to share their opinions and focus on their response and reactions to the reporting of a number of offensive graffiti and hate speech that has been found over a period of months in our community. Relatively isolated incidents. No apprehension has been made of any culprits or perpetrators. These are hard to find unless we have some kind of personal tip that can go to the police in terms of any investigation. But there was enough frequency there for a number of people to raise the issue, and so in addition to some affirmations here about what the values of our community are from our perspective as the council, we wanted to have a chance for other people to share those opinions. And there was about maybe 8 or 10 minutes of some prepared remarks that were presented at that Friday afternoon session, but it went on for an hour because other people from the community came up to share their opinions, which I think is a great statement. And while we were calling attention to something that likely was done with a motive of drawing attention, I think the message that we were able to hear on that Friday afternoon was 10 times louder, if not 100 times louder. And some of the folks that participated in that rally, it was not a protest as possibly described, it was a rally. Some of those folks came to the Racial Equity Committee the following Wednesday, which was just this past Wednesday. And so there's some recommendations that are coming out of that committee with input from a lot of different voices in the community that'll be coming forward. So there's some momentum in action, and I wanted folks to know that. And there are likely going to be some events coming up which people can learn about, some positive things and some educational things for the community to better understand where these things might be coming from and better understand what we can do, particularly around tightening up penalties and such for graffiti. So anyway, just wanted to announce that, and thanks for everybody that came out. It was a moving afternoon and took a lot of courage for people to say what they had to say there. So I want to respect that and appreciate that.
Thank you, John. Anybody else? I've got two things. One is we talk a lot about Main Street and how it relates to our downtown vision, and there's always a lot of talk about making sure that we're engaging with LL Bean so that we're not drawing a bright line and saying we have projects on the public side and they have projects on the private side, but to see what we can do to integrate those two projects. So we're having those discussions. We met about 3 weeks ago with John and I and Caroline and a number of department heads and FEDC and a bunch of folks to talk about imaginary scenarios. What would it look like if we did this? What would it look like if they did that? So we're trying to blend those two. So they're doing a very large redesign project on their campus. At the same time, we're re-envisioning our downtown. So there's a lot of reason for us to collaborate and communicate, and we're doing that. So just wanted to report back on that. You have a question on that?
Well, I think that's great. I mean, that's a very positive development and one that's been long coming. I guess the question is, what are we communicating about? I don't know if it's too early to talk about that or whether it's, there are no well-defined points being made. But if there are, then, we've all been involved in downtown visioning. We're all concerned about LL Bean, both plus and minus, and it would be healthy, I think, and transparent if we were able to share some of that whenever the time is right and before a decision is presented to us for affirmation.
Yes, and we would absolutely do that. The spirit of the first of these series of meetings was exploratory. So not let's bring sketches to the table, not let's approve this or tweak that. It's more, what are the possibilities? Because I think previously we had each been focused on our side of the line. So we just decided to say if we ignored the line or if we were willing to cross the line, what could there be? So lots of different ideas were thrown out. Some of them are not practical, some are more practical than others. But as we refine those and say, hey, here are 2 or 3 that we think might have legs, we would bring those back and share with the public, share with the council, and see if there's something we want to pursue.
Thanks.
Yeah. And then second is just sort of operational point for us. So I noticed that when we do our public hearings, we have 4 public hearings or more on the agenda tonight. Every time we've done public hearings, we make a motion to open a public hearing, we vote on that, we make a motion to close the public hearing, we vote on that, and then we vote on the actual item. Most other towns don't do that. So I talked to our clerk and say, do we need to do that? And we can't find a reason for why we need to do that. So what I would suggest, if you guys consent to it, is what we do what the other towns do, where the chair just says the public hearing is now open, and when we run out of things to say, the chair would just say the public hearing is closed. You guys can extend that if you want to vote and say, hey, we really want to hear from more people. We can do that. So we don't need those extra motions. So we'll get out of here 45 seconds earlier tonight if we do that. So, anything we can do to speed up the meetings. That's all I have. Any other information exchange?
You doing a search?
Sure. So we deciding which one of us is going to give you the update. But we're also in the process of hiring a town manager to replace our last town manager who left us in April. And Caroline has been doing a fantastic job filling in, and we all wanted her to stay. But instead, we got 97 applications, I think it was, for folks who were interested in being the town manager for Freeport, which alone is pretty impressive. We're not the only town to go through this. Most other towns had trouble attracting candidates. A number of towns gone through a search, reopened the search because they couldn't find qualified candidates. So I feel very fortunate that we have a good enough reputation that people want to come work here. So of those 97 applications, we've gone through a number of screenings and interview rounds, and we're nearing the end of the process. So we don't have anything to report tonight, but I expect that probably in the next meeting or 2 meetings, we will have some good news there and likely be bringing the process to a close. So stand by. We'll give you another update in 2 weeks when we meet again. Anything I missed?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Next up is our town manager's report.
So I feel like it's been quiet, but then I realize it's because I've been in a room with a lot of you mostly for the past 2 weeks. So as Dan said, we've been spending a lot of time on interviews for different things. 2 of the things that have been going on is we do, as a result of the community workshop we had on the 22nd about some recommendations from the Housing Committee, we did form a commercial core working group that's looking at some of the standards in our downtown district. That group has continued to meet once a week since then for an hour each Wednesday. They continue to work on looking at the design review ordinance and to see if there's some short-term changes we can make to that ordinance to help make things a little easier in the interim while we're doing an overhaul. So I think you're going to see something fairly soon. The group is meeting again tomorrow, but that is progressing. And then secondly, we did interviews for comprehensive plan consultants. We got 4 RFP responses. We interviewed 4 candidates, and we're working through that process now that the interviews are complete. So I expect you'll see something on your October agenda with a recommendation to award a contract to a firm. And that's all I have for you tonight.
Questions for the manager? Okay. So our 6th order of business is our public comment period, which I'll explain a little bit because I think there's a lot of new faces in the room. And first I'll say it's thrilling to have so many faces in the room. We usually kind of are up here talking to a mostly empty room, so it's nice to see folks engaged in town government. Feel free to come by or watch us on Facebook or on a town website for other issues as well as the one you're here to talk about tonight. So the way public comment works is this: we have this time set aside every time we meet, and it's a time for the public to come and address the council, to share thoughts. Everybody gets up to 3 minutes. We ask that you state what your name is, where you live, and these comments at this portion of the meeting are reserved for items that are not already on our agenda. So I'm guessing I know why a lot of you are here tonight. You're all here to talk about the stormwater ordinance that we're about to pass. or maybe moorings in the Harriseke River or outside the Harriseke River, or greenhouse gas emissions, which is also on our agenda. If you're here to talk about those things, hold your comments. We'll have another public comment period for those items when we get to them. But if you're here to talk about something other than those items, this would be a great time to stand up. And we do ask that you go to the podium or ask for, there's a handheld mic we can pass to you, so that the folks at home can hear what you have to say. So is there anybody who wants to talk about something that's not on our agenda? Come on up. And I'll ask the same of the folks on Zoom if they want to talk, to raise their virtual hand, and we'll see.
Just note the microphone looks like it's not adjusted properly, but our technician guy says it's exactly where it's supposed to be. So
it is. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
My name,
yeah,
excuse me. My name is Bill Rickson, and I live at 66 Varney Road here in Freeport. And I know that the Sustainability Board is on the agenda for later this evening with their findings about greenhouse gas emissions, but I'm not here to speak about that. But I am here to speak about another agenda, or another item that they are discussing. I was at their meeting last week, and they're looking, and we began discussing the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. And this Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty is a worldwide effort to end the construction of new fossil fuel infrastructure and for exploration. The board will most likely be advising the town council in the near future as to what they have learned about the treaty. And if anybody wants to learn more about what the treaty is, you could go to fossilfueltreaty.org. Now, I'm here to speak also about something related to that fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. Myself and others have been in communication with the LL Bean CEO, Stephen Smith, and we're encouraging him to encourage Citibank, which services the LL Bean credit card, to end the financing of new fossil fuel infrastructure. So if you on the council know of anyone who might like to help us in this effort, it's an ongoing effort. We're in ongoing discussion with LL Bean. So, and if anybody out there in TV land or streaming land know of anyone who might like to help us in this effort, you could get in touch with me. And again, my name is Bill Rickson. And is it appropriate to give out contact information, or is that?
That's fine.
Okay? Mm-hmm. Yeah. My phone number is 798-2088. And my email is my last name, Rickson, R-I-X-O-N, W9@gmail.com. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rickson. Anybody else have public comment on a non-agenda item? While waiting for stormwater. All right, I'll move. Oh, we go. Sorry, I apologize.
Hi, my name is Kristen Dorsey, and I actually was going to speak about this later, but it actually fits here probably better. Speaking of climate action planning, I am a member of the Sustainability Advisory Board, but this is a personal comment. It seems now, as we're embarking on the climate action planning journey, which is about, remediating, mitigating, offsetting all the damage that's been done by our culture of consumption. It also seems like a good time to kind of dip our toes in the waters of reconciliation. And I'm asking that the town council would consider developing a land acknowledgement. Many other communities and organizations have done so. And in that, what we're talking about is becoming better stewards of the land with our climate action process, and kind of having a more reciprocal relationship with the land and living sustainably and helping others to do so. I I think this is a good time to acknowledge that we took this land and interrupted and displaced a culture of people that have been here for thousands of years, the Wabanaki. And I guess that's all. So I'm asking that you start considering that process. Perhaps it's something that could happen on the Social and Racial Equity Committee. I don't really know what other processes have been used. There are a lot of online resources to develop the language and think about what it is our particular community needs to say about what we've done to and with the land for the 500 years that people have been coming to settle here and use the resources and misuse the resources. And once that's done, it should be visible at the entrances of Town Hall. It should be stated at the beginning of public meetings and events. And my thought, too, is with the garden the water garden that's going to be designed and constructed next year, that also would be an appropriate place to have some sort of, have the statement visible there and kind of as a centerpiece to that. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dorsey. Any other public comment on non-agenda items? Okay. Last call. Moving on. So the next phase of our meeting is where we consider a number of different actions and take votes. The first item we'll consider is item 17723, which is to take action relative to our consent agenda, which is a series of things that we vote on as a bundle. Tonight, there's two major things on it. One is donations to the community library. The other is appointments to a number of boards in town. We're appointing, I think, 8 people tonight. Much of the work we do in town is done by volunteer boards, by people who step up and say, this is of interest to me. And they come in and fill out a very short application and drop it with our town clerk to say, I'd like to be on this board. And then at a meeting like this, we would appoint those people. So tonight, there's a list of people on the handout, which is on the table. It's also online. We're adding 2 people to that list. For the Shellfish Commission, there's a blank line, and there's a name Chad Coffin that should go there. And then for the Cable Regulatory Board, in addition to Susanna Hancock, that should say from RSU 5, we're also appointing Greg Michaud for a term that will, do we know what term? How long Greg is going to be on the Cable Regulatory Board?
All right, so 2024.
Through 2024, so
September 2024.
for about a year. Okay.
I also have one amendment. Can we amend Susanna's term to end 2025 instead of 2026?
September 30th, 2025.
Yeah.
Okay. So does anybody have any reason why you need to break these up and consider them separately, or are we prepared to deal with them together? Councillor Bradley.
Yes, in preparation for tonight, I had an opportunity to sit down and talk to Dave Spears, who's our appointee to the planning board. And in talking about him, I realized some of his motivation for doing this is to get to know the community a little better. So I invited him to come to the meeting and make a brief statement about his interest in the planning board. And please, Dave Spears.
Good evening. Dave Spears here. At 102 Wolf Neck Road. We moved in about a year and a half ago, so fairly new to the community. Don't know a lot of the faces in this room. At a point in my career that I have a little opportunity probably to give back to the town a little bit. So I'm volunteering for the planning department or board. My background is in forestry, land use, and real estate. I manage a national real estate business, and I think I have a lot that I could offer to this board. A colleague of mine is vacating the position, and so I learned of this through him. This will be my first experience in town government, but I just wanted to step up here and introduce myself. Thanks.
Thanks, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Won't be your last experience in town government. Once we see a volunteer. Thank you for serving. It's a good time to be in the planning board. I'll make a note to one of the Enoch Boudreau, who we're appointing to the police advisory board. He's a student representative. He's a senior in high school. If he was here, I would certainly embarrass him by asking him to come up to the podium. But there are 2 student seats on the police advisory board, so he's a student rep. And we still have one opening for their student rep. So I think those are the changes, right? So we're adding Chad Coffin. We're changing Susanna Hancock's term to end in 2025, and we're adding Greg Michaud to cable ending in 2024, and we're changing Enoch to be a student rep.
But do you need a motion?
I would just offer that when we make the motion for the consent agenda, it would be as discussed, as amended. So, given that, I will move that we adopt the October 3rd, 2023 consent agenda as verbally amended tonight.
Seconded.
Thank you, Councilor Lawrence. All in favor?
Aye.
That's everybody. 6-0. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
And thank you, Dave. Okay. So we've got the first of several public hearings. This one is to consider action relative to amendments to Chapter 53, Post-Construction Stormwater Management Ordinance, related to updating the stormwater and erosion and sediment control standards. So the way we'll do these is we'll get an introduction, in this case by our town engineer, then we'll open up for public comment, and then we'll open it up for council discussion, and then we'll take a vote. And we'll do that for each of these in turn. So, Mr. Bliss, when you're ready.
Thank you, Councilor Filch. Do my best to be brief. I know I can accomplish that, as we have a lot of business to attend to tonight. 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, I was in front of the council to set tonight's public hearing related to municipal stormwater discharges. 20 years ago, the town became regulated by the Maine DEP and EPA regarding their stormwater discharges out of our piping system and into water bodies of the state, our streams, our ponds, oceans, etc. That is a permit written by the DEP, and with it comes a number of control measures to protect the water quality. Every 5 years, that permit gets renewed. It was reissued in 2022 with additional parameters. And so I'm here before you tonight to discuss those additional parameters and hopefully codify them within 4 ordinances. They are relatively minor in nature. They are doing good things for the water quality. It does happen to relate to 4 different ordinances, which is why we have 4 different agenda items and public hearings. And if I were to boil down all of the changes, they relate to erosion and sediment control, which are measures we use to put on a land when it's undergoing development. Keeps the sediment on site rather than flowing off site. We are also adopting references to the Maine DEP's Stormwater Management Design Manual. This is a design standard that we are required to have in our ordinance. It's already there by reference. We're updating the language to make it consistent with the latest design revision. Those changes largely are connected to zoning and subdivision. We also have Chapter 27 and Chapter 53. Again, they're all related. They just touch different ordinances. Chapter 27 is what is titled Non-Stormwater Discharge Ordinance. We have that defines what is allowed and what is not allowed to flow out of our system and into the streams. And what's being changed in the current Chapter 27 ordinance is a timing mechanism if an illegal discharge is observed. And that gives a 60-day maintenance repair window to eliminate that discharge. Related to that is Chapter 53, titled Post-Construction Stormwater Ordinance. And that's after the site has been fully developed and stabilized, but maybe it's not functioning the way it was designed and permitted. So that ordinance is being revised to also include that 60-day maintenance repair timeline. I'm going to take a pause there and open it up to any questions you may have, and fill in any gaps that may exist.
Councilor Egan?
Do we have any outstanding violations now that this is going to help kind of recover or repair with the DEP in terms of our current MS4 permit?
We have an outstanding report card with the Maine DEP. So the answer is no, because we have done well on the tests so far.
So we're upgrading to the latest compliance requirements and adopting that into our ordinance so that we can continue that effort?
Correct. And they largely already exist, but we are making some tweaks. We're clarifying some language and definitions so that it's clear and reflected in the ordinance.
Councilor Bradley?
So Adam, at the meeting where we set this, you clarified that this does not apply to private landowners who might have an erosion control issue on their property. Is that correct?
That is correct. The threshold is for land development sites that are an acre plus and within a U.S. Census Bureau defined area.
And because I'm ignorant about the sources that are affected, could you just sort of briefly describe the discharges that this will affect? What are the sources of the discharge?
Sure.
Or what?
Yeah, I'll keep it simple, and it's a good question. During construction, it's sediment-laden water that flows off a site between the time the ground is disturbed and when it's reseeded or paved over.
Private development?
Sorry?
Private development sites?
Private development, well, public and private, okay. Yeah. So that's during construction. Post-construction is maybe they have some sort of water quality pond that is functioning correctly. The developer, public and private, would be required to make those repairs. And then the non-stormwater discharge would be, say somebody has gray water that's being pumped directly to the stream rather than to a leachate field. Just one of many examples.
Thank you.
Councilor Fournier?
With our existing ordinances, we've got a great report card with DEP. They're telling us we need to do this, which I don't like the state coming down. I told you this at the last meeting, telling us what to do, number one. It creates some more of a workload on our existing staff, which is already overworked. So say we voted no. What's going to happen?
We could be found non-compliant, which could lead to fines, could lead to, bad press. Another way of answering your question, Councilor Fournier, is we're largely already doing these. Myself and the code enforcement officer. So the permit that we're regulated by is codifying these into our ordinances to ensure that they happen.
All right. if there's no other questions, we'll do public comment, and we'll still have more time to discuss. So I'm sure Councillor Bliss will give up the podium for a minute in case there are people who want to comment on any of these stormwater ordinances. If so, please step on up.
Careful, Adam. Step back.
Just going to stand right here.
I misread the room, and everyone's not here to talk about stormwater. All right. If there's nobody on Zoom either, then I'll close the public hearing, and we'll bring it back up for more council discussion, if there is any. And if there's not, then Councillor Pillsbury, I'd entertain a motion.
Be it ordered that amendments to Chapter 53, Post-Construction Stormwater Management Ordinance related to updating the stormwater and erosion and sediment control standards be approved.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's 6-0. 6-0. Councillor Daniele is excused tonight.
I had one question on this. There was a note in here. Are you adopting this amendment, the recommendation from the planning board that didn't make it into this draft here?
That's for chapter 25.
Yep, chapter 25.
Okay. So that's the third
11,
one.
6.
So that'll give me some time to read that.
Okay, sorry. I thought you were doing them all together when you said.
No, we have to do them separately, yeah.
Perfect.
So the next one is item 180-23, which is similar to what we just talked about for the second of the 4 ordinances. This one is for Chapter 21, which is our zoning ordinance. Do you have anything further to add, or did you cover it all already?
Nothing other than I think you called me Councillor Bliss, which I appreciate.
Habit. Maybe someday. Maybe someday.
I want the $800 back.
All right, so I'll open the public hearing for amendments to Chapter 21. And I'll invite the public to discuss or ask questions. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and ask if there's any discussion. And if not, I would ask Councillor Fournier if you're willing to make a motion.
Certainly. Be it ordered that amendments to Chapter 21, Town of Freeport zoning ordinance, Section 529, stormwater management, and Section 602, site plan review, related to updating the stormwater and erosion and sediment control standards be approved.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's 6-0. That carries as well. So the third of these ordinances is Chapter 25, which is our subdivision ordinance. Similar background. I'll open the public hearing for this one. See if anybody's waiting for the subdivision ordinance to come up and speak. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. But before we take this vote, I think Caroline has some information to add.
Yes, so in the memo from Cecilia Smith, our assistant planner, there was mention that the planning board had discussion about a further amendment to Article 11.6.B.D, which was a standard to strike where it said a sample of this agreement is attached as Appendix J to the ordinance. You don't have Article 11.6 in your packet, so I would say leave that out for now, and when we bring you the LD 2003 amendments, we'll put the cleanup in, because the packet before you only had Article 11.16, not 11.6, if that makes sense.
So we just ignore everything you said.
Yep,
That's what it
ignore
sounds.
me.
Okay. So we'll approve it as it's written tonight. There may be another change coming later.
Yeah, because that change didn't get incorporated into the language you had before you. I think you're best to leave it out for transparency.
Yeah, she just turned.
My mic's on.
Okay. Any questions about that? Okay, so we have done the public hearing for this one, but we need a motion, which I believe Councillor Lawrence might be willing to make.
Be it ordered that amendments to Chapter 25, Freeport subdivision ordinance, Article 3, definitions, Article 11, approval standards, Appendix D, Appendix E, Appendix F, and Appendix J, related to updating the stormwater and erosion and sediment control standards be approved.
Second. Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0, that carries. Next item is 18223, which is the last of this set of 4. This is for Chapter 27 for non-stormwater discharge. So I'll open the public hearing for this one. Pause an appropriate length of time. And then seeing no public interested in speaking, I'll close the public hearing and offer for Councillor Bradley to make a motion.
Be it ordered that amendments to Chapter 27, non-stormwater discharge ordinance related to updating the stormwater and erosion and sediment control standards be approved.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
For work on this. I know you put a lot more work into it than we gave it time tonight, but it's important, and I'm glad you're there to do it. Okay. Next up is item 18323, which is to consider action relative to amending our coastal waters ordinance to add language to address mooring assignments outside the Harrisseeket River anchorage. So we'll follow the same procedure. I'll ask our harbor master to come up and give us some background on this, like you did last time, kind of how it came to be, why we're here. And then we'll have a public hearing, and then we'll bring it up for council discussion. So, Charlie, do you want to offer some words on what this is about?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just give a brief description of, I believe I was here last week, or week before last. But the changes that you see before you are to put an annual registration on moorings outside of the Harrisseeket River. You know, the last 5 years, it's no secret that the demand for moorings has gone up exponentially. So this is just trying to tighten up what we have out there, putting numbers associated with the moorings, you know, having folks list an inspection date. We're not mandating inspections, but to, you know, list the inspection date and what their tackle is. This does not include moorings within 300 yards of Buston's Island, which I know is a big concern, but this excludes the moorings that do surround Buston's Island. Let's see. Yep, so like I said, numbers, mooring inspections, and a big thing that I'm hoping that this will address is some of the like ghost moorings that we have out there when properties are sold. That's a complaint that I get, is that the mooring is just simply left out there, sometimes with the winter spar on it, which, you know, eventually becomes a, you know, hazard to navigation. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, unless anyone has any questions for me.
Will Charlie be staying around?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'll be right here.
Yeah.
I might run, but
Hopefully it's a polite crowd. Thanks, Charlie.
yep.
So why don't we open it up for public comment? Again, everybody's got up to 3 minutes. We ask that you tell us who you are, where you live, and then you have your 3 minutes. It's not a time for back and forth debate. It's more just a time to state your feelings, your opinions on this particular item. So who would like to kick that off?
Might as well kick this off, right? All right, my name is Joyce Vayu, and I live on Island View Lane. I attended several of the coastal water meetings, and I want to thank them for all the back and forth that we had to make this the best compromise possible. But I believe there are still a couple areas that need work before the council does a final vote. And I will be giving this to the lady at the end so that she has all these notes. But under definitions, you should add a definition for the riparian owner. Also, on the wait list categories, there is one that's called resident or non-resident subsequent. I'm not even sure what that one means, and it's not in the definitions. On page 9, paragraph 5, it talks about the wait list for the moorings inside the river And it states that, quote, after March 16th, the harbor master will award any remaining moorings assigned to persons who have been on the wait list, end quote. For complete transparency, I suggest that a statement should be added that says the wait list assignments will be made in chronological order, making it hard for someone to claim otherwise, which has not been a problem during this harbor master's reign. But we have to think about the future. Article 5, mooring assignments, for complete clarity, should be divided into two different articles, one for the mooring inside the river and one for those outside. Page 14 and 15 talk about the moorings outside the river. Some of the paragraphs say the things are for the river, some say they don't. It's just kind of confusing, and I think it would alleviate a lot of confusion and questions if it was two separate items. Maybe a little repetitive on some things, but not as confusing. On page 22, paragraph 22, lists the required information to be part of the registration form for outside moorings. Line D, Delta, calls for a description of the watercraft. I believe there needs to be a provision for riparian owners that have legal short-term rentals and advise the mooring, and they advertise the mooring as part of their rental. They will not be able to provide that information, and therefore they shouldn't be denied mooring just because they don't have that information.
30 seconds left.
I can't do all this in 30 minutes. I don't agree with the fees, as you know. I've sent you all emails about that. I'm already paying $4,000 in order to have a mooring out there, and I've had one since 1947. I don't think I should pay anything more. I also think you need to look at having two separate mooring sites for non-riparian owners, where people are currently putting moorings in outside of Winslow Park and also outside of the harbor by Wolf's Neck, so that the people on the wait list, we could get some off, and so that people that don't own waterfront property could. And I will be getting you on Zoom because I have to go home to a sick husband.
Oh, I hope he feels better. Thank you, Joyce.
I'd like to move to extend Joyce's 3 minutes because, you know, she's worked hard at this and she's raising some points I haven't thought of, and I'd like to hear more from her if that's okay.
So at one of the committee meetings, I asked the harbor master
All in favor?
Yes.
Okay.
why this amendment was needed. His response was because there are a number of moorings that are being placed near Winslow Park and just outside the harbor near Wolf's Neck. People have put in 1 to 4 moorings in some cases, and he has little to no jurisdiction to do anything about it. Yet this amendment does not address this problem. There are no limits on the number of non-riparian moorings or what specific areas they can be placed, or if they can be placed. I find no mention of Freeport resident non-riparian owners. Areas where the Freeport residents can place a mooring outside the river should be identified, limits set, wait list established, etc. And then they could be charged a fee. Also, no section talks about how outside the river will be notified by the harbor master of decisions, except that termination will be done in writing. But what about approval? Which leads to page 2021, Article 12, appeals. Quote, appeals will be made in writing to the Coastal Waters Commission within 5 days of the decision. If the registration is completed by the 1st of March, he gets his letter out to us. I'm sorry to say, but the U.S. Post Office is not going to be able to make that 5-day time frame. So that time frame needs to have some work done. I strongly disagree with paragraph 26 and the fees, but I do strongly agree that we need a registration and that the harbor master needs to have some control and jurisdiction over all of the moorings in the Freeport waters.
The Freeport waters.
Freeport waters.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thanks.
Yeah, come on up. And feel free to queue up behind if you know you want to speak. You can stand in line.
My name is Jamie Arison. I live at 138 McCoy Drive in Freeport. I see most of this as an attempt to solve a problem that doesn't exist. Now, where there could be a potential for problems is in those very few areas where there are potential for a higher density of moorings. So if the entire process was thought out better, such that if we were adding oversight to specific areas, that it was targeted exactly at those areas where there were, say, for example, more than 20 moorings over a certain density. So you're not saying, okay, we've got 20 moorings all down this coastline. That's not a case where you need additional oversight. Where you have the pockets of high-density moorings, that is not only a potential benefit for the registration, it's a better use of the harbor master's time. It is not a good use of the harbor master's time to be buzzing all the way up to the Brunswick line to address an extreme scarcity of moorings up that way, either for the addition of the fees, for the addition of the paperwork, the extra steps involved. Where the density is that much lower, it is much easier to solve any problems that arise because you got a couple of neighbors. You know who the people are. You can talk about any of the problems that arise. The only time where you need this extra regulation, the extra oversight, is where the density makes that not possible. So frankly, it's more in the areas, whether it's Bustons or Goslings or right outside the harbor, where there are density issues. But I'd leave that for somebody else's points, because that doesn't directly affect me at all. What I would like to see is to not have any additional regulation outside the harbor, or if there is, have it restricted only to those areas where the quantity of moorings and the density is such that it is actually going to help solve a problem. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, James.
I think I'd like to follow my neighbor, and I provided some handouts, given that his mooring is next to mine. And I'll emphasize his point. First, I'd just like to ask the audience, poll the audience, who in the audience here has been in touch?
Could you state your name and where you live?
Oh, I'm sorry, Peter Thompson, 7 Byram Ave, Freeport. Just want to curious who's been in touch with or has been in contact with their counselor or the harbor master, input for their questions. Okay, a couple of people. Good. Anyway, you can follow along the presentation here just to make that point that was just made. I want to emphasize that we did not receive any notification of the meeting, although I know that certain riparian landowners were. I'm a member of the Swan Area Development Number 1, and I want it to be known, factually known by the council, that all of the lot owners in Swan 1, Swan 2 have deeded fee interest in pedestrian ways to the shoreline. There's 5 total. So everybody in that development has a commonly owned pedestrian way. They are irrefutably riparian right owners, and that certainly doesn't seem to be acknowledged by the town. And all the lot owners have the right to make customary use of the ways by the deed language. Follows with their property. In fact, we actually have a defined and upheld district court order settling litigation between Swan Area Development and Carol Chipman and Matt Chipman, defining the legal status of those ways. It's absolutely rock solid, irrefutable. And yet we're not seen to be included in any of the mailings that come out with regard to other riparian owners. So a quick comparison of the anchorages. I want to emphasize the points made by my neighbor. If you look at this next second page, you'll see a comparison of the Harriseket in Island anchorage. It's about 144 acres. With updating the numbers that the harbor master provided, 218 moorings, you have a mooring per every 0.66 acres in there. If you look over at Lower Flying Point on the right of your figure, you'll see we have approximately 330 acres that are currently being used by residents as an area in which their boats are moored. Now we only have about 25 moorings there. All the land access is private. There's no public access to the water. That gives us a mooring capacity of over 500 if you use the model of the Harriseket River.
which means that we're using less than 5% of the capacity of that anchorage as residents. That has not changed in the 30 years I've had boats there. Maybe 18, 20 people had moorings there 25, 30 years ago. Yet the harbor master just claimed that we have exponential growth in this demand for moorings. Well, this isn't borne out by the facts of where we are. There is not a problem to solve in this area.
20 seconds left.
And it does not require regulation. Next picture gives you an idea of the anchorage. As my neighbor has said, it's sparsely populated. There's no impact on the navigational channels. In fact, there's been no navigational channel that needs to be protected that has been defined by the harbor master, which is stated in the ordinance. And under statute of the state, the whole purpose of harbor masters and anchorages is to protect those channels, yet none has been defined. So, you know, there's adequate room for all the landowners with riparian rights where we are, and we don't believe that we should be regulated outside the harbor as specified in the ordinance. Again, other pictures to give you an ideal view from the water.
You wrap your comments up?
Yep. Well, we'll go to the last page. So there's a lot of people who believe that the town proposes to limit our riparian rights and charge a fee for mooring privileges that we've always enjoyed and are already taxed for. We were told by the town tax assessor he understood very fully the value of our property, and we pay a higher tax because of our access to the water and use of the water. We're paying a fee, a higher fee in taxes. So I agree with Joyce. And such mooring fees don't provide any tangible service or benefit in return. And I think if you push this, if you don't really consider what the residents are saying, you're probably going to be looking at a referendum on this ordinance if it goes through as it's currently envisioned.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else who wants to come up? Come on up.
Hi, I'm Allison Smith. I'm 29 Merganser Way. My only point is on page 15 under 22D. So I have a mooring. The mooring was there when I moved in 9 years ago. I've never owned a boat. I'd like to, but it just hasn't happened in my work, personal life balance. So under D, when it says description of the watercraft to be moored, so if I don't have a watercraft, does that mean my mooring is, you know, I'm not able to have one? That's my question, because I think there are people who have moorings that maybe don't own a watercraft yet, and so where do we fit into that? That we'd like one, but again, I don't have anything to list on the registration form, so just take that into consideration. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Come on.
Hi, I'm Sally Smith, 16 Edgewater Trail, Freeport. I'd like to say yes to everything the people before me have said. It feels just like total overreach from the town. Let's see where we can get some money. You know, it has nothing to do with being helpful or responsible for anything. If it's crowded at Winslow Park, then say Winslow Park needs special attention. If it's crowded anywhere else, you say that. But you just don't say. Suddenly, Bobby Small, his family's had that mooring for 70 years, and suddenly he's going to have to pay $50 a year for it. That's crazy. Absolutely crazy. When you have lived here as long as some of us have, you don't need this overreach. You really don't. Do it where it makes sense, where it's crowded and where the harbor master has to pay attention. Don't do it in front of my house where there's nothing except my house and my pier. You know, it doesn't make any sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally.
I'm Nadia Saliba. I live at 95 Lower Flying Point. I just want to echo what a lot of other people have said. It seems like this is a regulation in search of a problem, and I'm not sure exactly what it's trying to address. I would say that all of Charlie's comments could be addressed with a registration form rather than an application. So, and I have no objection to a registration form that just shows who is responsible for which moorings. But I do think that's very different than applying for and being approved by. So, and again, I would also echo that the areas of concentration, it might be better focused on where we're trying to address a specific issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia.
My name is Jay Thomas. I live down on Byram Ave, and I think I've stood up in front of this group 3 or 4 times in the last 25 years I've been here, because for the last 25 years this has been trying to get passed through. I guess the only thing I would add to this, I think there's a lot of good things that have been said, is maybe Charlie should spend some time making some different anchorages out there. Luston's Island's its own anchorage. We have the Inner Harbor, its own anchorage. We can put one around Flying Point. Maybe we should put one out off of Byram Ave, Lower Flying Point. So if we could have some different anchorages, it might be a way to go and say, okay, we're going to deal with anchorage B now, which is Winslow Park, and yes, we're going to have some regulation there because there's a lot of people that are wanting to put moorings. Whereas, go out by Flying Point, and it can be anchorage C, and we have a very low density, and we're not quite there yet. So that might be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Who else would like to speak? Again, I'll invite anybody else who knows they want to speak to line up behind the podium.
My name is Phil Clifford. I live on McGanser Way. I certainly agree with all the points that were brought up tonight, why we don't need a fee. Historically, I think since colonial times, there's never been a fee for moorings outside the harbor. I'm kind of a history guy. I kind of like the way it is. And I was on my way up here today, and yesterday I was trying to think of what in Freeport is free anymore. And the only thing I could come up with is the moorings. I don't know. There must be something else, I hope. But, once that's gone, Freeport is not a free port anymore. So, thank you.
Thank you, Phil. We do have one hand up on Zoom, I think.
Josh Clark.
From Josh Clark. So, Josh, you're welcome to speak.
Hello, my name is Josh Clark. Can you hear me?
We can, yes. Go ahead.
All right, excellent. Let me just get to my notes here. I think, well, first of all, my name is Josh Clark. Family pays taxes for Sound Pigs. We have been residents since 1963. We have always had 1 or 2 moorings in use in all that time. I do applaud the town of Freeport for their efforts to tighten up mooring situation, because I'm sure it's an issue, because you wouldn't be bringing it up if there weren't. It makes sense to register moorings, but as you've heard everybody speak tonight, the fees are kind of questionable. In the language change that you've got going on here, there should be indication of what the cost of the registration would be and why the fee is needed. For example, if the town will take no responsibility for the mooring, then they should charge only a tiny fee to register it, whatever the paperwork would cost. It has been noted in that Luston's Island gets a buffer of 300 feet. I feel that all island owners should have the same. And the other thing I'd like to mention is under 22D, description of the watercraft, that there should be language in there that gives flexibility to put other boats on there other than just what you have at the moment. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, I'm Pete Bowman, 91 Lower Flying Point Road. I want to, again, echo what everybody said here, and just to add that I live on Brickyard Cove, and it's very quiet and uncrowded. We've absolutely never had an issue with moorings in our neighborhood. So, for what it's worth.
Thank you, Pete. Anybody else who wants to speak?
My name is Ken Mann. I live on Wolf's Neck. I've had a mooring down the end of the point there, off and on, when I was a kid, full-time for the last 55 years. Can't imagine what this would have added up to if we were had to pay a fee during all that period of time. I would suggest that I wouldn't be there now. I wouldn't be enjoying the water, and certainly my kids wouldn't be. An example I want to give is when I was young, I really enjoyed cars, boats, and the girls came later, but enjoyed them too. But I used to walk up and down the shore of Wolf's Neck on the west side, especially after storms, and find dinghies and small boats that were broken loose from South Freeport. And I'd tie them up, make them secure, and usually if they were good boats, people would come and get them in a very short period of time. If they weren't, I'd take them home. If they were any good at all, go to Mariners and buy a stern board or something, fix them up. And I'd throw my landline outhaul out over so I could get out there during all tide. And it was a great way to grow up in Freeport, to have access to the ocean, to be able to have a boat when you're a kid, not even old enough to have a driver's license. It's sad to say that based on this ordinance, those days will be over, because an outhaul under this ordinance that goes into water, which is not too much sense in having one unless it does. Otherwise, you got to drag your boat around. You know, it would be prohibitive for a young person. I think it's prohibitive for older people too, to have to pay on an 8-foot punt. I have an 8-foot boat. I row it. Doesn't have a motor. This page 2 has a definition for haul outs. It describes perfectly what my haul out is. When I went to the Coastal Waters Commission hearings, I thought that they were going to try to regulate my mooring for my 23-foot boat. The public was there at the public hearings. It was
20 seconds left, Ken.
What?
No.
My time is up? Is that what you
got
said?
about 40 seconds left.
I'd like to have permission to extend just a little bit.
So moved.
Thank you.
Is there enough? There were 3 of us. Is there a 4th on that?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, this is important to me. I've been a citizen here all my life. It's hard to lose these rights. It's hard to think that my kids and my grandchildren won't be able to afford to be there and enjoy this. So we have that on page 2, a definition of exactly what I'm doing. This means I'd have to register according to this, not only my 23-foot boat, but my 8-foot boat. So the fee is undetermined at this point, but it's been recommended $50. Depending on how you read the memorandum from the harbor master, it could be a per foot charge as well. At a minimum, for me, depending on the per foot charge, be almost $170 a year. I just can't see, you know, for the 4 or 5 times that I get to go out on a rainy summer, how it's even practical for me to own a boat anymore if this continues, if this gets approved. If you look at page 5, it talks about a skiff being a light rowboat of less than 14 feet. Well, you know, I don't even know why that definition is in there particularly, because I can't find skiff mentioned anywhere in the ordinance. And it says rowboat. Well, that's exactly what I have as a rowboat. I don't put a motor on it. But what if you do put a motor on it? What definition does that come under then? Good question. I think that needs work at the very least. I don't even like it. And you look at page 8. It talks about termination. All persons assigned mooring. The the entire previous year whose mooring assignment is to be terminated by the harbor masters for reasons of non-compliance with the Coastal Waters Ordinance. Okay, I get that. If you're not in compliance, the harbor master has the right to terminate you. But the next words are, or for any other reason. Well, you know, if I'm going to appeal the decision of a harbor master under any other reason, I can't cite the Coastal Waters Ordinance because he's not doing that either. So what does that mean, any other reason? We try to make our ordinances clear and understandable. This isn't. Okay, also on page 8 is a provision here that talks about you can only own a mooring in your name or your spouse's name. Well, we had a voluntary system here a few years ago to send in, your specifications and your mooring location and your boat size and who you were, what your phone numbers were, which I did. And I put on that my wife's name, myself, and my son, because my son uses my boat as much as I do, sometimes more. And I wanted to be able to pass that mooring down to the next generation. And I wanted to have it on file that, at least at that time, and it still is, a jointly owned mooring, family mooring. As I read this, it's only a spouse. I don't know what you do with folks that aren't married. That seems to be an issue nowadays, because there's a lot of those around. Domestic partners aren't listed. I don't know why not. They're listed everywhere else, and they should be. Okay, then you go to page 10. Talks about abandonment. It says here that they can, terminate your mooring if you haven't used it in the previous season. Well, heck, season's pretty short around here. They can't even say year. They're talking about if you haven't used it as a season. But you look at it closely, it says substantially unused. Well, what the heck does that mean? It means that you only use it once in a while, you're going to lose it. That's what it means to me. I think that needs to be fixed or removed. I can't find anything good in this ordinance, to be honest with you. There again on page 14, it talks about husband and wife, no domestic partner, no children. You lose it. Then you look further on page 14, it talks about moorings outside of the harbor, again, and it talks about the harbor master coming up with, places that you can't put it based on his charts and the channels. Well, there's no map here. We have zoning ordinances, we have a map that shows you what you can do. It'd be kind of nice to have a map that shows where the channels are. I don't think people really want to interfere with navigation, but there's nothing in here. I mean, I assume he's going to come up with something, but it'd be nice to see where you can't put a mooring before you pass something like this. So where's the map? There isn't any. Okay. And you go to page 18, and it says, it talks here again, and this gets down to the thing that's touchy with me. It talks about the boats, 8 to 14 feet, have to comply with all the rules for permitting, the numbers, the inspections, the whole thing. I really don't think that boats under 14 feet long are a huge problem where you've got to register it every year, put numbers on your moorings, have them inspected, do all these reports, and take the chance that you might even lose it. I think that's just so much overkill, it's pathetic. Sort of agree with Sally Smith on that and others here. And then I think Joyce brought this up. This is a real killer here. Page 21 talks about 5 days to appeal a decision, a written decision of the harbor master, and that's just totally impractical. You can't, you know, if somebody has a good boat and has a real problem, maybe they got $100,000 invested in the boat, maybe they got $5 invested, but they're adamant that they want to appeal this. There's no way you can hire a lawyer to represent you and make an appeal in 5 days, and then it says, for example, they shall hear the appeal at the next meeting, next regular meeting. What if the next regular meeting is on the 6th day? You got no chance to get ready. It's crazy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks for the extra time. I appreciate it.
Hi, Laura Vitale. I live at 44 Merganser Way, and I want to thank all my neighbors and other residents of Freeport for turning out and doing your research. And I really, I want to echo, I would say, just about everything that's already been said. So I don't need to take up anybody's time with all that. I've lived on Buston's Island. I've owned property out there and familiar with the process out there, and that's been in place, and I know that's not being touched. There's been some talk among my neighbors in an email thing about perhaps, you know, we could have a harbor master for the area that's outside of the harbor and all that, and some kidding around about, you know, making it a Commodore or something of some kind of yacht club, which I know they do on other peninsulas. They do have yacht clubs and go that far, but I really hope that we don't have to get into all that regulation and do that. I think that what's already been pointed out about the flaws in the proposed new language and the overreach has been well documented already. I just felt like it was important to, as another resident in the area, take time out of my day to come here and let you know that I support my other neighbors and would like to see a lot more careful attention applied to this before it is enacted. And I also want to say that I'm here, but not all the time, so I wanted to make use of my time while I'm in Maine, not in Florida. I'm really lucky I get to do that. So I wanted to make my voice heard at this meeting tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
I'm Cliff Abbott. I'm also from Merganser Way. I don't have a mooring, but someday I might like to. I'm concerned with the fees. I'm concerned with the application process, as other people have stated. But I'm also concerned that the issues that the harbor master have and that we have in the harbors are addressed maybe by registration, maybe by zones. I'm not the smart guy on the water. I'm the dumb guy on the water. So I'd like the experts to handle that. But as far as overreach and overkill, I think we got it here. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Cliff.
Yeah, Andrew Osnott, live down Route 1. I guess I'm a riparian owner. I got a little piece of a creek across the highway. I never got a notice, so I guess maybe I'm not. I'd like to address the abandonment issue. I think this is a huge overreach to begin with, this fee. I can understand, you know, really regulation inside the harbor. It's very congested. There's a channel there. There's really no channel outside the harbor. I mean, there's a mud flat up Flying Point side. It drains out pretty well over the Yarmouth River, over the Cousins River, so I don't understand where the anchorage or the navigable channels would be. But abandonment's an issue. If I'm a riparian owner on a year like this, when a lot of people didn't put their boats in because it rained most of the summer, do I have a risk of losing my mooring because of abandonment? I mean, years ago I had a mooring in Yarmouth because it was close to my home and I didn't use it for a couple of summers. And, you know, within the harbor, they just decided to take it away. Now, of course, I wasn't a riparian owner in Yarmouth, but that was in the anchorage. But I can't understand why you're doing this. If you're looking for extra revenue, this is a poor way to do it. All you're doing is peeing off on everybody here that owns a piece of waterfront and wants to own a piece of waterfront. Years ago, we gave up $500,000 worth of transport fees, that were coming into the town of Freeport. Instead of taxing people, let's look for ways we can raise revenues without taxing people or feeing them to death. Darrell set up a nice transport fee thing, and we gave that up. And now you're trying to tax these poor people with a fee and a bunch of regulations that aren't going to bring us in a tenth of that money. So I think you need to focus your money hunger somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Anybody else?
Carter Becker, Stagecoach Road. Spent a lot of time out there on the water. I'm just asking you to reject all changes that are proposed, look at it further. There's a lot of expertise out here that haven't really chimed in on this. A lot of people have spoken great ideas and done a lot of research. They need to participate in the development of this rather than sending it off to legal counsel to get their verbiage. These people have been heard. I hope you hear them too. And just reject everything in here and let these people help write the changes to the ordinance that might really be needed, not a problem that doesn't really exist. Thank you.
Thanks, Carter.
Hi, I'm Jessica McCurdy. I live at 45 Cunningham Road. I'm a non-spouse who has their name on a mooring. And I have only lived there for 3 years, so this whole water thing is new to me. And so I just wanted to make a point that I have noticed in the 3 years that I've been there, I've just been learning to sail, and that it's really hard to get out now because there's so many oyster farms. Like, we go like zigzag, zigzag to get out of the cove. And so that's interesting to me because I'm kind of new to the topic, but hearing tonight that there's such a crowd of moorings, but there really, from what I see, are very few moorings and lots of oyster farms, which I know is a whole other topic, but it's something to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Anybody else? Anybody on Zoom other than the old hand from Josh? Give one more shout out for anybody to speak who hasn't spoken but wants to come up and offer a few words before we deliberate up here. And not seeing any, I will close the public hearing and ask the counselors if you have questions or items to discuss. Councilor Fournier.
I've actually had some people visit me on this one and call me and got quite a bit of attention. And I really appreciate everyone coming up and talking this evening. I'd like to propose that we table this to a date certain. And, I'm thinking we start our budget deliberations in March, and I don't want to add to that. And if we postpone this to a date certain for maybe a year, if that would allow time to go in, to get input, like Carter said, and other people, is this such a time-sensitive thing that we couldn't do that? And that way, that would be on our agenda, then we could, address that from there. And maybe a year is too long, but I think, we need to have a date certain because that seems to work for us if we have a particular time frame where they can bring it back to us. So I certainly would like to table this and have more input, have it rewritten, but I'd like to attach a date certain to it.
Is that a motion?
So moved.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you.
Any discussion on the motion to table for a year? Councilor Egan.
Darrell, I just wonder if there's any room where we could actually ask the harbor master for the details on the registration of the form or whatever we're going to call it. Because it seems like that's something that maybe should not wait a year to continue to have potential hazards where the harbor master doesn't know whose boat or who's mooring. So it seems like we at least need that some sort of a I don't know what you want to call it, a form or separate the fee, separate who's in or who's out or whatever it is, but just so that at least the harbor master knows whose boat is on whose mooring.
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed, to that. I think there is a need, and so I don't know how it would work that. But, I think we got a lot of balls here that we're juggling.
I agree.
And I think that is an important issue to look at. But
Councilor Bradley.
Yeah, with respect to the time, I mean, you're not going to do anything for this season. It's over, right? So if you take your time between now and the next season and get done what you need to be done, which I think addresses John's concern, because the harbor master is not going to get much out of registration if we do it immediately. I think that a lot of really good points have been made. I haven't heard much concern about registration per se, to let the harbor master know what's on what mooring, where, and when. But other than that, I would say that this ordinance confuses inside and outside so much from my perspective, and I'll confess I was a maritime attorney, dealt with moorings all the time, and I can't make sense out of this in my living room. I'm sure Charlie could make sense out of it for me, and I mean that positively, that I think he knows what he wants, and I don't think what he wants is bad, but I think this ordinance is not the way to get there, and so I would support Darrell's motion to straighten out the language of the ordinance.
I'd encourage us, without saying that whether I support or not the motion to table, I'd encourage us to discuss, because what I'd hate to see happen is everyone takes a bunch of time to come here, offer their points, and have us all just be more or less mute and silent on it and say, come back next year and we'll talk more. So I'm not saying we should pass or we shouldn't pass. I'm just saying we should talk. People have come out to hear what we have to say.
And maybe a year is too long, and maybe what we should be doing is tabling it until the coastal waters can come back and say, okay, now we're ready, they've got the input. I agree with that, because if we kick this can down the road too far, we're going to lose all the input and everything. So I guess I certainly am willing, maybe just, we might have to amend that again, Chip, but if we could have a motion to table at this point until they're ready to come back, I would certainly be in favor of that.
You did say to a date to be determined.
Yeah.
So we could put whatever date in there.
You just said a year, though, didn't you?
No.
I hope that had to be determined. I was recommending a year, but I have no problem backing that up.
Councilor Pillsbury?
Well, I think to your point, I mean, I don't want to just table something without a process to get to a resolution. And I also don't know that just debate up here and asking a few questions after hearing input from the public is going to get us any further along. But I think a work session where we have the Coastal Waters Commission, us, and public input, and we can actually hash out some of the issues, because I think there's some legitimate concerns here raised by both sides, and I think we need a better ordinance that takes into account everything we've heard. And I mean, I've got a lot of questions, but I think they're to different stakeholders and different experts. So I don't know how to work through that, but I'm uncomfortable just saying, like, let's just punt it and maybe we'll figure it out at some point. I think we should set a time for us to actually have a targeted meeting and work through the issues at hand.
Would this be appropriate for ordinance?
I think, to Matt's point, it's there are a lot of people who have an interest. I think coastal water should be there. I think we should invite the public.
It's a workshop.
Yeah.
I think it's a workshop that we need to do. And
I'd be more productive to have the whole council there, because we're all going to have opinions on it anyway. I think, just to clarify, we have seen this before. This has been brought up. We have postponed it. Yeah. So it's not the first time it's come up. We've basically tabled it before. I'll offer some thoughts. I know we still have a motion on the floor, but my opinion, it's not a money thing. We're not going to get a lot of money from this. I don't care if we get $5,000, $10,000. It's not going to make a significant difference to our town budget. I don't think that's any of the motivation for, I'm guessing not motivation for coastal waters. It wouldn't be my motivation for doing this. So the fee is almost tangential to all the other changes. So I could see us passing something like this without a fee, with a $10 fee, with a $25 fee. I have questions for Charlie about what other towns are doing and things like that I'm curious about. I agree with a lot of the changes that have been proposed. I think Joyce had some good ideas, as a lot of other people did. I'm eager to make it better. I don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good and say let's do nothing because it's not perfect. I think it's, like Matt was saying, we should do something. We should have a plan, whether that's tonight or in the future. Yeah, so I have a number of questions for Charlie. I can ask him tonight. I can ask him later.
And I think it should be maybe, there's two parts to this. One is in a registered harbor like we have in Freeport, and then outside the harbor, or like someone said, a couple of mooring spots where we have an issue. But two different ones, so you deal with the moorings and you deal with outside the mooring area. And having lived on a river and having had a dock, it was in New Jersey, we didn't have any of this stuff. It was, you want a mooring? Yeah, put it out there, put a dock out there. And the mooring got pretty complicated, but I don't know if that's still that way today, but I appreciate Ken's comments because I was one of those kids too.
Anybody else want to offer thoughts?
My only concern is we have some of our residents that are able to go to warmer weather too, and I hate to miss out on them because they're going down. So, let me focus back around on the date certain thing, and I like your idea, Matt, is maybe we ought to be looking at a workshop with coastal waters, maybe December, while things are fresh. That gives some time for Charlie to some suggestions, and maybe, John, I think you're right. We need to have something, for the next season, and that would also give us some time to rethink that. So is that something we could look at, maybe scheduling, if we look at the date certain, to have a workshop and keep this fresh in the forefront?
Yeah, we have council meetings on the 5th and the 19th of December currently. I do feel like if we are going to postpone this, it would be nice to pick a date so everybody here tonight knows exactly when we're going to be taking it up again, so nobody's surprised. Yep. We could do the week in between, which would be the 12th. Which would be
Do you want to go that
between
far?
our two meetings.
You want to go that far out? What about November before everyone moves to?
Okay, I think we only have one meeting in November, which is our organizational meeting. We're going to have a new council that got sworn in on the 14th, and usually that's the only business we do on the 14th. The week after that is Thanksgiving week. And then there's the 28th, which is the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, which is available.
How about you guys? What do you think?
As long as, like a workshop or the meeting is available via electronic.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, usually we don't usually do our workshops on Zoom, but we could get it set up that way. Yeah.
Could easily
Yep.
do that.
Yep. So you guys want to do the 28th of November? A combined workshop with the Coastal Waters Commission, and we'll have two new counselors. That'll be their first real meeting.
What date was that?
November 28th. It's a Tuesday.
Tuesday after Thanksgiving.
We usually meet at 6 p.m. I assume that's what we do for the workshop.
That's the week after Thanksgiving.
Ed, you'll still come as a citizen, though,
As a riparian.
Yeah. So what time are we looking at, Mr. Chair?
I suggest 6. That's what we usually do.
Okay.
Right.
Is membership on this workshop open to the public?
Sure. Yeah, the question is the workshop open to the public? Yeah, the workshops are always open to the public. We're not required to take public comment at the workshops. I would encourage us to if we're going to go through all this trouble. But it will be up to the whoever's on the council at that point and the Coastal Waters Commission. It's a joint workshop. But the public is always invited for sure.
And I think we can use this as a base,
Sure.
a good base.
So you're not expecting Coastal Waters to take into consideration any comments made tonight and make modifications? Your workshop will start with this base document as is?
I think Coastal Waters could go in and do some of the work and take in all the comments, and then we can review it at the workshop, because then it gives us something, okay, this is...
So we need to give them time to act. And so, they have at least one meeting between now and then. Yeah. Councilor Bradley?
As a counselor who won't be on the 28th, I'm going to ask one thing for Coastal Waters. And That is, I think a lot of the problems that people have is that it's hard to figure out what applies inside the anchorage, that is the Harrisika anchorage, and what applies outside. I think Charlie has a very specific, small proposal for outside, and I think if everybody understood how narrow that was, we'd be less concerned. But I think Coastal Waters and Charlie ought, in advance of this meeting, to make it clear which of these provisions apply inside the anchorage and which ones don't. And then we could start from a knowledge of what we should be concerned about. There'll be some things we'll be concerned about without regard, but a lot of the confusion, a lot of the opposition, I think, would dissipate if we really truly understood what Charlie and the Coastal Waters are proposing for outside the anchorage, outside the Harrisika River anchorage.
I like Joyce's idea of splitting it, having to two different articles.
Well, it's now so merged and interconnected that I couldn't really tell what things applied where. And I think that it's why a lot of people, Ken listed a lot of things tonight as objections, but I think, frankly, that most of those don't apply outside the anchorage. It might be wrong, but that's what I think we ought to clear up, because then we wouldn't have unnecessary objections raised.
Sort of on that note, I wonder if I could ask Charlie a few things, not that we're going to decide anything tonight, apparently, but that might be good to get on the table. So if there's research we need to do before the 28th, or if there's more feedback that we have from the public, it'd be good to know. So I know you looked into other towns. Are there other towns in Casco Bay that don't charge a mooring fee?
No.
We're the only town that does not charge a mooring fee?
Yeah, correct. Just outside of the anchorage here.
And anybody who has a mooring today would still be allowed to keep their mooring. We're not taking anybody's mooring away into the current proposal?
Yeah, they'd be grandfathered whenever this was approved by council.
Okay. If I don't own waterfront land, if I want to go and put a mooring out in front of Ed's house, is there anything today that stops me from doing that?
Nope.
Can I put it right up close to Ed's house?
Put it wherever you want, really.
Do you have any ability to do that?
Well, the biggest problem I have is when nothing's labeled or numbered. I don't know if at one point there was 10 moorings out there or 11. So that one that someone sneaks in, which happens every season, I get a call where, hey, this mooring magically showed up right here. Whose is it? And I honestly have no idea what to tell them. So.
Can you remove moorings? Is that allowed for Harbor Master to do?
I don't know how I would go about doing that. I don't have the equipment, or, no outfit's really going to go and remove moorings for free. So.
Okay. I just got one or two more, and then I know you guys have questions. And is there any cap proposed to the number of moorings that would be allowed outside the river?
Nope.
And in the future, if I came to you, if there was a registration requirement, and I said I'd like to register a mooring and put it somewhere near Ed's house, and I fill out the form and I pay any fee, would I be allowed to do that?
I think the way we described it with our commission is it kind of be on a case-by-case basis. If you have access, whether it's a note from Ed saying Ed's allowing you to cross through his property or park on his property to access your mooring, then that's one thing. But if you're someone from Gray, New Gloucester, or somewhere else, it doesn't even matter where else, and you just want to put, a cocktail mooring out by Sour Pigs, that's not really the intent of, having a mooring. So you could which does happen, seems like every season out here. So
you could say, no, I'm not going to give you a
correct.
permit for that mooring in that location. And if they didn't like that, they would appeal to Coastal Waters.
Yeah, they could come right to Coastal Waters and say whatever they need to say.
Is there a provision in here, Charlie, that gives you that authority?
Say that again?
Is there a provision in the Coastal Waters Ordinance that gives you that authority?
I believe it says all other mooring requests shall be approved by the harbor master. So it kind of just gives it.
Okay, this is where the confusion comes in.
No,
so, I have about an hour of cross-examination, but I don't want to do it here, and I guess I'm going to have to go to the public meeting to do it, because we're not going to decide anything tonight.
It doesn't look that way.
Could I just come in and talk to you about this thing?
Yeah, anytime. Yeah.
Councilor Fournier.
I guess I'd like to take your history, too, particularly as we come into the harbor, where these moorings are popping up and can create a hazard. And I know apparently at Winslow Park, people can come down and put a mooring out there and visit, and so we may have to engage them and see how we can solve some of these issues, because there seems to be creep occurring, so certainly we want to address that, and I think, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
If there's no other discussion, what I might suggest, Darrell, is if you want to add or amend your motion to say you'd prefer to table to a workshop on, well, the workshop, we wouldn't actually be taking action.
No.
So if you table to a date to be determined, leave that as is, with the understanding that we're scheduling a workshop on the 28th. I think that's the way to do it. So the motion on the floor is to table this particular item, which is the changes to the ordinance, to a date to be determined. And that was already seconded by Councilor Lawrence. If no further discussion, we can take a vote on that tabling. So all in favor of tabling?
Aye.
And I'll vote no on that, so it still carries 5-1. And that's all we have on, I assume that we're also going to table the fee item, which goes with this, which is item 18623. So if you want to make a motion to take that item out of order and to also table that, that's probably a good idea, just so that no one's under the illusion that we may take that up sneakily later.
I would like to make a motion that we take item 186-23 out of order and to table that till a further date.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Bradley, were you in on that?
I oppose.
You oppose that one? Yep. So that carries 5-1 as well. Okay. All right, so that is all that's on our agenda for moorings. So again, thank you all for coming. As you leave, I do have one request. We have a lot more business to do, and we have to leave our doors open because it's a public meeting. So people have a tendency to go out in the hall and congregate and discuss and chat. We love the discussion, but if you could do it over towards the front doors, or it's a beautiful night outside. It's a great night to discuss outside so that we can continue our meeting. But thank you all for coming. I look forward to seeing most of you on the 28th, I hope.
So that was 6 o'clock?
6 o'clock on the 28th, yeah. You get sign ordinance next. Maybe we'll explain that later. We're just setting a public hearing on that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Did you guys need to take a break or no?
I was hoping things would clear up pretty quickly and we could keep going. Yeah, I think we can keep going. The next item we have is all we're doing is setting a public hearing for changes to our sign ordinance. And I think Carolyn will explain what this is about. And this would be for a public hearing at our next meeting.
Sure. So the ordinance committee had been looking at some changes to the sign ordinance as a whole that has just got kind of sidelined with everything else that we've had going on. But we do have a business in our community that had a sign that they wanted to replace, but they couldn't replace it because it's in the public right-of-way, because we don't allow signs in the public right-of-way. In years past, even though it's not what the ordinance said, we had been allowing these if the applicant, they either got approval from the manager or council, and they entered into an encroachment certificate. So they would get permission to have the sign, they'd sign something that said, okay, we know it's on your property. If it gets destroyed, damaged, hit by the snowplow, or if you ask me to take it down, I'll take it down. And then everybody would go on their way. Signs that are in the right-of-way also under state law have to get sign off from the DOT commissioner. So all this would do before you tonight would be to add a provision that if somebody wants a sign in the public right-of-way, they could get approval from the town manager, get approval from DOT, and then the code officer would have the ability to issue the permit. don't think it's appropriate for signs in every location. 2 locations specifically that come to mind in the specific location of this business would be Lower Main Street and Independence Way, where we have a really wide old right-of-way. So what looks like front lawns of businesses is actually the right-of-way, and there's many signs in there. And although they can repair them, they can't put new ones and they can't replace them. Another location in town where this has come up over the years is Mallet Drive. Another really wide right-of-way. You drive by and see grass and signs, and a lot of those are in the right-of-way. So that's some background. I know you'll have some business owners come to the public hearing to weigh in on this.
And the change is just one sentence.
Yeah, we're just bringing forward the one sentence. In this case, the business owner's been waiting quite a while to see if this would be an option, so we just pulled it out and brought it forward on its own.
Any questions? Councilor Egan, do you have interest in making this motion for item 184-23?
Right, I got to read my glasses. Be it ordered that a public hearing be set for October 17th, 2023 at the Town Council meeting starting at 6 p.m. in Town Council Chambers, 30 Main Street, to discuss amendments to Chapter 23 sign ordinance pertaining to a provision regarding signs inside the public right-of-way.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Lawrence. Any other discussion? All in favor of setting the public hearing?
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0. Okay. Next up, we have action relative to approving proposed amendments to our general assistance ordinance and the appendices for the maximum amounts, which is something fairly routine that we do every year. I believe we may have Sarah Lundeen from Freeport Community Services available.
Yes, Sarah is on Zoom tonight, so I just promoted her to a panelist, and she can give you a little bit of background.
Sarah, do you want to tell us about this?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I feel like I haven't seen you in forever, and I'm sorry I'm not there. I'll be there in a couple weeks. So every year we need to update the ordinance for general assistance. It's something that the state mandates. And I think as long as we've been doing general assistance in Freeport, we've kind of followed along with those ordinances set by the state. So there are 3 key areas that we're seeing increases, which is standard as with every year. There's the overall maximum, which is kind of like the overall pot of money that we can pull from per individual and situation, kind of dependent on how many people are in their household. There's also a slight increase to the food maximums as well as the housing maximum. And so we'll have all of that provided for you to review. I think is it the 17th?
It is the 17th, yeah. Any questions? We'll be seeing this again on the 17th, but if you have questions for Sarah. Councilor Pillsbury, I think we're back to you if you want to make this motion.
Sure. Be it ordered that a public hearing be set for October 17th, 2023 at the Town Council meeting that starts at 6 p.m. to discuss amendments to Chapter 46, General Assistance Ordinance and Appendices A to H for the period October 1, 2023 to September 30, 2024.
Second.
Councilor Lawrence, any discussion? So all in favor of setting that public hearing?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 6-0. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for sticking around. We'll see you again in a couple of weeks.
Of course. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Night, sir.
We have already dealt with item 186, so our next item is item 187-23, which is to consider action relative to setting carbon reduction targets for the town of Freeport. So, like we did in the past for the other items tonight, what we'll do is we'll ask Mehdi Smith to give us some background on this. I'd also invite up the Freeport Sustainability Advisory Board who's been working on this, if they want to add any background on it. And then we're not required to do a public hearing on this because we're not actually changing an ordinance. But given the amount of interest, I thought we'd offer to open it up to see if anybody in the public wants to talk about it, since we didn't let them talk about it during public comment.
And I'll just add that you do have representatives from GPCOG on Zoom tonight. They're the ones that can answer questions if you guys have any detailed questions on some of the data that Minnie showed you at the last meeting.
Hey, Maddie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Minnie Smith,
Sustainability Coordinator for the towns of Freeport and Yarmouth. Thank you very much for having us back tonight on this issue of setting greenhouse gas emissions reductions targets. So the same information was included in your packet for this meeting that we discussed and presented on during the September meeting. And so FSAB is here again tonight on the issue of setting these targets officially. And so as a reminder, the targets that were recommended by the Freeport Sustainability Advisory Board over the summer are to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 65% community-wide by 2030, 85% by 2040, and strive for net zero emissions by 2050, and an additional goal of reaching net zero emissions for municipal operations by 2040. And so just to reiterate what these targets are doing in the climate action planning process and the value of them that we see. So really it is to allow the climate action plan to be more data driven. And so allowing us to work backwards from these targets to set metrics that will allow us, as we're implementing actions and getting into the work of the climate action plan itself, to understand if we're making progress towards reaching these goals. So these are aspirational targets that there's no penalty if we don't reach them. Other communities across Maine and the nation are setting targets, across the spectrum of aggressiveness, these targets, and Susanna Hancock on our board can speak a little bit more to the international climate consensus around some of the numbers that we're presenting and recommending that this council move forward with. But I think that, we've been having conversations around the value of these targets and what it really means to set the targets to reduce emissions. And I was thinking through it and kind of wanting to compare it to setting a Vision Zero plan. So Vision Zero being a planning process where there's consensus around zero is the right number of fatalities from, pedestrian and cyclist fatalities that our community wants. We don't want any fatalities. And a lot of communities work backwards from accepting the Vision Zero goal and work backwards to create strategies to achieve that, knowing that they may never reach that goal, but that's kind of the consensus, the benchmark they want to work towards. And so in the climate action planning process, it works similarly where we have a recommendation, a consensus around the targets we want to achieve and by what date. And then in our process, we will work backwards to define strategies and actions that will move us towards those targets. So I think that there are definitely clear benefits in our planning process as to adopting targets in this kind of format so we can move forward with modeling data and get into the work of refining strategies and actions with community input over the next couple of months, which I think is like the real meat of this process. And I think there'll be some really exciting dialogue coming out of those interactions and feedback. So I would love to invite Susanna Hancock from the Freeport Sustainability Advisory Board just to give a little background. She has a lot of professional experience in this space. And like Caroline mentioned, we do have our consulting team from the Greater Portland Council of Governments on the line if you have any specific questions that we're unable to answer, or if they want to speak to how they're doing this with other communities.
Thank you, Maddie, and thank you all of you for considering this before us. So I'm Susanna Hancock. I live a mile down the road on Flying Point, and I'm a polar climate scientist and work with organizations like the UN and the World Economic Forum to bring urgent climate science into dialogue and global dialogue. And I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the Town Sustainability Advisory Board. So last July, on the 3rd, we had the hottest day that the world has seen on average in 125,000 years, and we followed that up with 35 consecutive days. We've had, so far, as of mid-September, 23 separate disasters in this country alone related to the climate that have exceeded a cost of $1 billion. Heat domes in the United States, Canada, and Europe were virtually impossible without anthropogenic emissions that has been officially determined. And for most of the summer, a minimum of 1/3 of this entire country was under urgent heat warnings. For the first time, we've passed or surpassed 1.5 degrees, which the global community has established in the Paris Accords needs to be really our target. It's not proving to be a safe space for humanity. Canada, which is still on fire, has burnt more than 600% of its average burn for a season. Greece has recorded, or still recording, Europe's largest wildfire. For each degree that the atmosphere warms in centigrade, storms like hurricanes can pack a 7% more punch when they come to land. And at a point where Antarctica 2 weeks ago hit its maximum extent of sea ice, it was still an area the size of Mongolia had still failed to freeze, which has impacts on atmosphere and global circulation, oceanic circulation systems. At this current rate, we're looking at something like $3 to $4 billion in health impacts by the end of the century. Our emissions, and it's great because it's actually a linear relationship, but they've destabilized Greenland so much that it's committed a minimum of 10 inches of global sea level rise. This is threatening immediately 600,000 people and $1 trillion of global wealth. So the question is whether this is the world we want, because it's currently the world we've got. And it's here too. We've got the Gulf of Maine that is warming the fastest body in the world, and oceans are absorbing 90% of our excess heat. Our fish are migrating northward. Our zooplankton no longer have their lipid coating because they don't need it in our warm waters. Many of the fish that were landing here are actually governed and monitored by mid-Atlantic states. So the quotas, our fish are under a quota system that doesn't even relate to New England. And the increased acidity from the carbon dioxide is impacting the classification of our bivalves. I work every year on a blueberry farm. This year we lost 80% of the crop, directly related to climate lack of predictability. Last winter, more than 86% of moose calves didn't survive the winter that those were monitored. In August, I got to walk down Commercial Street at a full moon high tide, and the water was up to my knees at parts of Commercial Street. So this is an issue that's happening here, and it's happening now. The sea level rise that we're having here is thermal expansion. Half of it is about thermal expansion, so it's from that warming. This is causing saltwater intrusion. It's causing increased storm surge. We're not as insulated here as we like to think. But we have that responsibility as well. It's not just about a small town in Maine, but it's what we're doing, our due diligence to the Paris Accords, to our future, to people who are migrating due to their own climate crises, to the 36 million people last year that suffered from the drought and starvation in the Horn of Africa, to the conflict in the Sahel, where the water resources are driving herders and farmers against each other. We know that new fossil fuel development is not going to increase our energy security, and it's not going to reduce our costs. We also know that we now have, as of this year, last year, real-time data where we can measure the actual emissions of different corporations, of different locales. But this also means that we can measure our impact. So what we can do is data-driven. We can monitor it, and we can have real impact. So our goals with this proposal and our actions are in line with the best available science. They're in line with international standards, and we encourage you to pass this part of the Climate Action Plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Susanna. Wow. Yeah. So, on that somber note.
Can we ask questions?
We could. We can do the public hearing first and then ask questions. It's probably a little easier.
They're all going to be here.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to get up, for this portion, we'll do the same as we did before. We'll give you 3 minutes, say who you are, where you're from, and then what you would like to share with us. And then we'll come back and deliberate as a council. So does anybody have anything they want to add to what's already been said?
Who gets to go swimming on October? Who gets? Kathleen Sullivan. Can you hear me now?
I'm old and my ears don't.
Yes. So I'm Kathleen Sullivan, and I'm here on behalf of Freeport Can, Freeport Climate Action Now. I just was beginning my preface by saying, who gets to go swimming in the beginning of October and feel like the ocean is warm? Everything that Susanna said is absolutely true, and it's just quite frightening. And we're seeing this. We saw this all summer. So I'm no less frightened than Susanna, and believe in everything that that commission that FSAB wants to do. To bring it down to Freeport, I want to talk about where those emissions are coming from in Freeport, because what it looks like is that so almost probably between 40 and 50% of those emissions we are not, as residents of Freeport, responsible for. Those emissions are coming from our business community. Their emissions are coming from our visitors and from particularly one business in town, and that's LL Bean. And what we want to encourage the council to do is to, and encourage FSAB to do, is to invite the business community to the table to reach these goals. And we would like to ask the town council to specifically invite Beans and the business community to the table for the planning process, not plan it and then talk to them, but have them at the table. I spoke today with the woman who's the head of ACTT, A Climate to Thrive, one of the most successful climate action organizations in the state of Maine. She's one of the most respected leaders in climate action planning in Maine. And she strongly recommends that we involve, not just by saying we have a public meeting, involve the major organizations in this town, the business organizations, the organizations like the Lions Club, the Masons, and specifically invite them to meetings for the climate action planning that's happening. And that with that kind of involvement in the planning process, we are much more likely to have these goals met. This was not done, she said, on Mount Desert Island. On MDI, they set goals. I only have a minute left. But on MDI, they set goals and did not actively involve the business community in the actual planning process for how they were going to implement those goals. That action plan, still sits on the shelf. It didn't get activated at all. In the town, in a different town, they have included, though, which town? Fremont. They have included them in very active planning, and they are able and finding that action plan is now actionable and is now happening. So we'd like to do that. We'd like to recommend that the town council invite them to, and we would also like, well, maybe to ask that this be not passed, but this be passed provisionally. Until we find out we don't have all the data yet. There is data coming, but I think there is not yet the data. FSAB does not have the data on where all these emissions are coming from yet. And I would like to suggest that we will not be able to even begin to meet these emissions unless we have these people at the table and have clearer data about where it's coming from. So I would like it to pass provisionally.
Thank you, Catherine.
Good evening. I'm Bob Stevens, and I'm also a member of Freeport Climate Action Now, also on the FSAB board. And in participating in that board, I have picked up on what I believe it was Councilor Lawrence, when the presentation was made in September, talked about that we do have different contributions to the traffic here in Freeport. And what we have is something that's very important to us, which is LL Bean and the other business community. What we have for data on traffic is just what it is over a period of a year. After that meeting, I requested that the board go back to GPCOG and arrange for some data that would give us monthly information. We'd have something maybe for July, we'll have something from January, so we can sort of see what we all are in our normal days contributing to the traffic in a non-high business season. And then we can say, okay, well, we've got 36% of this passenger vehicles. Well, actually, we don't have all these as residents, but what we do have is them coming here to town. So let's figure out what is realistic to set as a goal. We're not just talking about aspirational goals. Goals are something that you set with the idea that they're attainable. And what the board has now arranged with GPCOG is for additional data. They will provide monthly figures. There will be that traffic is coming from outside into Freeport, from Freeport going outside, and traffic what is just inside Freeport. So we'll have that data soon. I believe the contract that Medi has pushed, and Mandy and the board have asked Medi to arrange, is that they will have that data by the end of October. Clearly, what we've got is a need to figure out, do we want to set a target just that we can deal with, that is, without involving major contributors to that traffic? Or do we want to actually say, hey, we really need to do this, and to do it?
You're coming up on your time, Bob, just to give you a warning.
Thanks. I'd appreciate just a minute longer if possible. That it would be good to engage those other parties in it so that they don't get blindsided by something we do here, that they're actually part of the process of setting goals. So the request I'd like to second is that if these goals look like something, if we can get everybody involved to agree they are goals, that's wonderful. But if that's not the case, perhaps we need to look at what is actually realistic. So the idea is to adopt them provisionally with the direction to the FSAB board to directly involve, which I think they probably would be doing going forward, but now with respect to goals as well as how to implementing them in the future. The other thing, if I may add, Mr. Chairman, just briefly,
kind of out of your time, Bob, unless you want to hear more. Is there?
I would move we extend.
Are there another three in support of that?
Yeah, thank you. It's very brief, about 5 seconds, which is, and maybe the board would be doing this, but I think this is such an important item for the town that you may want to make sure you arrange that there are periodic reports to the council on what's being done to collaborate with others in town and what the progress is being made with respect to meeting those goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Hello, Vali Staverlink. I am the co-chair of the Freeport Sustainability Advisory Board. Is that better, Ed?
That doesn't help.
No, just speak loudly. Okay. Vali Staverlink, FSAB, and I'm here to thank everyone who has been working super hard on bringing this proposal to the table for you to consider. All the points that have been made today by members of FSAB or FCAN or the public are absolutely valid. They're all on the table. All are being considered. We're all on the same page. We have already started talking about how to engage the community. Last Thursday, I attended a panel meeting for B Corps at Wolfsneck Farm. Maine Beer was there. There were other members of this community who are B Corps. I was there to get informed about how best to approach the business community and how to basically highlight the benefits of adopting sustainable practices, how this is a really question of increasing the bottom line for businesses if they keep their customer happy by adopting these goals. The next generations of consumers really care about these things. The next generation of workers really care about these things. They are, the business community is already embracing these things. There are conversations going on. We are a part of the conversation, so I thank Kathleen and Bob for highlighting the need for that, and we absolutely, completely agree, and we wouldn't do it any other way. As far as the targets, I agree that we want to have targets that are achievable, and that's why we set them. We didn't just arbitrarily choose them to be the ones that we're proposing. We actually have been working super closely with GPCOG. They are experts in this area. They believe that we can achieve them. They are supportive and encouraging of us, striving to do something that really shows commitment to these values. But they're saying you need to be realistic. Strive for what you think you can do. We believe you can do it. But these are fluid goals or targets. And as you can see, Maine One Weight has its own targets, and they surpassed some, and they fell behind on others. So they've been changing and adjusting as the process evolves, and we plan to do the same thing. And I thank you for supporting us, understanding that this is something that we all do together, and that we are likely to achieve what we set forth, but we also need to be ready to adjust and move a little more nimbly if things happen in a different way than we anticipated. And technology is changing, so we need to account for that too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ally. Anybody else? Public comment? Anybody on Zoom?
Hi, Kristen Dorsey. I think the value in setting targets, clear targets, any organization does strategic planning, and that's what it begins with, and then it's backwards planning. These were very informed targets. We had lots of data to look at and had many discussions around these targets. They are achievable. And the other piece about the targets is we've kind of kicked the can down the road. We need to get to this place very soon. Decades have gone by where they've been telling us certain thresholds that we have to stay under before we start seeing climate change, and that did not happen. So I think the value of setting these targets, the town leadership doing so, then brings people to the table, or we invite people to the table, and inform them. This is an opportunity for citizens and business owners to learn, gather the resources, find out the information. I mean, we have stratas of people in this community that, barely know how they're going to get through the day feeding their kids and keeping a job, let alone worry about what's happening 10 years from now with the climate. So I think this is an opportunity for leadership to do what they are supposed to do, which is, maintain the well-being, making sure the common needs are met. And aside from the transportation piece, which is a large piece of it, there are also opportunities for us to make sure that homeowners and citizens are safe. The vulnerable populations are protected from all the, issues around these big storms and fires and all that, and, new technologies that are coming out to heat their homes and transportation, get them transportation that's sustainable. So I think it's time to set these targets. I'm just going to leave it at that. It's backwards planning. You set the targets, you figure out the ways to get there, instead of just kind of rolling along and hoping that people, will do the right thing. It's sort of like asking a 5-year-old, do you want your cake now or do you want your cake later? Oh, have you had enough cake? Of course they're going to say no. So I think aside from dealing with the business community and the transportation problems, I think these targets really set the tone for a commitment from the town to start working on this now. Thanks.
Thanks, Kristen.
Hi, Mandy McPherson, co-chair of the Sustainability Board. I just want to reiterate what she said about working backwards. So it's actually a very common process. It's called backcasting, and they started it somebody invented it in 1990. So you have a vision of where you want to go, the targets, and then you go back to the present where the data is, and this is the data that we've been collecting with GPCOG's assistance, and we'll be getting more by going out in the community. And then you do the planning with the strategies and implementing the actions to get to those goals. So it's this ABCD process, where you want to go in the future, where we are in the present, and how we connect the two. And I also think it's really important to set those targets because it shows, we're hearing a lot of gloom and doom here, right? And I teach about sustainability, and it's a balance between talking about that gloom and doom and getting people excited about doing things, bringing out the positive, because it's so easy to just get this massive eco-anxiety and shut down and, what are we going to do? How can we do it? And so I think by having these goals, having the targets set, having a plan in place, we've got a whole stakeholder list that we've already been reaching out to that includes members of organizations, business community, individuals from different groups, and getting people excited because, hey, here we have these goals. We think we can reach them. If we don't, we're going to adjust. We're going to stay on top of this, and we want to bring you to the table and get any of your great ideas. And there are so many creative people in Freeport, so it will be, it's exciting to just get people thinking about this and moving in a positive way. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Suzanne Watson, 21 Carriage Road. I've been debating about whether to speak or not because I feel like the elephant in the room has already been mentioned. We are not a common town. We are a town with a very big employer here in our community. And that employer, it is a global hub of transportation, of trucks coming and going, visitors coming and going. I don't think we can really say that we're just like any other town who doesn't have a big particular business concern. And I just feel like this is the leverage point. This is the time when you can really sort of say, if we're serious about these goals and we're serious about this transportation being a big piece of it, that we do leverage this point in time, maybe provisionally with these goals, but I do feel like if we don't recognize the elephant in the room, a lot of this will be for naught. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. Others, I think we're running out of people in the room, but there are a few more if you want to come up and speak. All right, so bring it back up to the dais here. Thoughts from councilors? Councilor Fournier?
Don't want to throw a wet blanket on this, but we had a discussion 2 or 3 meetings ago when we were going to do a community-wide questionnaire to engage people. So my question is, when are we going to do that? Because I have a lot of people still out there that come to me, and we hear gloom and doom. You're exactly right. We don't hear some of the positives. We've got to engage our community. I'm at large up here, and I've got a lot of people right up here that are saying, wait a minute here, where are we going? So let's engage people. I hope we do that, because if we don't, we're setting ourselves up for division. Thank you.
Councilor Lawrence.
Yeah, I think you said it. We need to include everybody when we're setting these goals. We haven't, have we? This is what we think we can do. This is what we need to do. But the business community hasn't even been, you're just now starting to call them. So I think to set the goals appropriately, you go to the business community and say, this is what we'd like to do. How can we do this? And then we vote on this is what we're going to do. We've kind of put the cart before the horse. I know that's what you're all talking about. Well, we do. We put the cart before the horse. Then we come out and plan how we're going to get and build that cart. But so I think we need to wait until we have talked to the business community. Also, how many other people have you reached out to? Because when you came here last time, I'm talking in general, but we had 137 signatures. There's 8,000 people in this town. I'd like to see more. Because we represent the whole town. We're not just representing a small group. And it seems like it's the same group that's always here, and that's great, and I appreciate all the time you put into this. But we've got to adjust for or set up for the whole town.
I just want to clarify that there has been outreach to the business community done during this process, and I think that email list for this group is at over 700, Medi, that we've reached out to about these community workshops. I mean, getting them to come, I think, is another challenge. We had hoped that between our community relationships and some outreach with our FCAN and FSEB that we would get them there. But many in the business community are aware. I believe many has met with the elephant in the room sustainability. You have not met with their sustainability coordinator? Yeah, there has been some outreach. I think it could be better. We did talk about more outreach at the last meeting. I felt like when we left the last meeting, the talk was that you guys were going to consider goals at this meeting, knowing that we still then, no matter what you did tonight, wanted to do additional outreach in the town-wide mailer, which we're adding a lot of things to now. So just kind of wanted to clarify that a little bit.
I thought it was the other way around. We were going to try and outreach and then get voted on this.
I felt like you started there and then went to goals, and then obviously Medi had tried to do some outreach, but I thought you were, no matter what you did tonight, I thought you were going to try to do outreach after the fact, was where you landed at the last meeting.
Councilor Pillsbury.
So I don't disagree that we do. I mean, we're at the stage, this is setting the targets, right? The target's informed by data. It's informed by GPCOG, who we hired to do this work. I mean, the targets, it's informed by science and data, and we can debate it all we want, but if we want realistic action against climate change, we need to go by this. We don't need to open it up for a public forum to say how many people believe it should be 12%, 75%. I mean, that's not going to get us anywhere. We've paid someone to do this. We've paid experts to do it. It's in line with what the state of Maine is doing, what the international community is doing. I think where we engage the public is in this process of how to achieve those goals. And that's where we engage the business community, the community of anybody who wants to participate. But to me, I don't see the value in opening it up. I mean, I'm not a climate expert. I couldn't weigh in on these numbers and say what it should be. I mean, that's why we paid a group to do the work for us. So I think our job is to approve what's been put in front of us and then work through a public process to figure out how we're going to achieve these goals. And I think that's where the rubber meets the road, right? I mean, if we don't attempt to achieve these goals, we're not going to have a home to live in. So I get that we want to engage the public, but there's value in listening to the data and the science.
Councilor Bradley.
I almost can't figure out where the disagreement is. You know, I'm listening to people who, my green light is on. I'm listening to people who say, you know, aspirational goals are important, and that's the group that brought them forward. I'm hearing others say, if you don't involve the entire community in developing aspirational goals, then they won't be there to help you with the solutions for our community, which involve our behavior. I don't see anything wrong with aspirational goals. I mean, I don't see how they hurt anybody. You know, they're not punitive, they're not directive, they're not regulatory, they are a direction in which this group is telling us based on science. Anybody who listened to Hannah's statement tonight has to be moved. We got to be moving in that direction. How we get there and how close we can get to it informs us about other things, you know, about whether these approaches matter or work or anything else. So personally, I support the aspirational goals, but I would not ever stint on the efforts that you say that you're making, and I hope you are directly, to involve those responsible for the impacts that we're experiencing in our community, because it's only in this community that all of us can affect, I take it. We're not setting goals for the country or the state or for the county or anything else. It's for Freeport, which involves the businesses that are here. I sort of agree with what Suzanne said. I mean, and I think Kathleen said it and Bob said it, that there are big businesses in this town that have big impacts on our ability to meet these goals. They've got to be at the table. They've got to be involved. They don't have to set the goal, but they've got to respond to the goal if the community supports it. So I'd support it. I'd invite them. I'd make it hard for them not to come, however that happens. So that's all I got.
I'll offer a couple of thoughts. I'm in support of the goals. However, they're well in excess of what the state's goals are. I think that's not a secret, right? The state wants to reduce gases from 45% from 1990 levels, from 33 years ago. And we're saying we want to reduce it 65% from 4 years ago. That's a lot more. And the data that we saw shows that the vast majority of our emissions come from visitors, come from people driving to see LL Bean. So yes to everything that everybody said. We can't do this without being at the table and the other businesses in town. We would be setting ourselves up to fail. So we have to do that. So I think the goals are aspirational, but important. We can't set them too low and say, oh, we've done our job, pat ourselves on the back, our job is done here, and let the rest of the world struggle with it. That's not the right way to go about it. I think it's appropriate for Freeport to be a little bit out in front, given our brand, right? We are a town of LL Bean and Patagonia and North Face and the outdoors and the environment, so it makes sense that we might be a little bit ahead of some of our neighbors and where we set our goals. I don't know how we're going to get there. I have a lot of faith in the work that you all are doing and GPCOG is doing, and I'm glad we have somebody on staff now to help us with this. I have a lot of questions about data and research and where it's coming from and supporting it and all that. That's sort of my background, and I look forward to lots of good conversations there. And I do think we have to balance the gloom with the excitement, right? It's easy to get depressed about this and say the world is getting too hot and going to explode. I'm exaggerating, of course, but the important thing is that there are things that we can do that will make a difference. Maybe they'll only make a difference here in Freeport, but that's all we can do from this dais. And I think it's important to do that. So I think they're aspirational. I'm concerned that we're setting ourselves up to have some very difficult conversations to say, geez, I don't know if we can get to 65% or 85%, but it's worth trying. So for that, I'm in support of and I'm definitely in support of all the things you're doing, and I'm in support of the goals tonight. Look forward to the conversation. We absolutely need to do the outreach, because I think honestly, it's just so much more powerful if we say, look, our community wants this. If we say, most of the 7 of us want it, or there's a group of 20 people that want it, that's powerful. But if we say, yeah, 73% of our town wants to do this, that's powerful. So yes, all of the things, yes to all of the things, to the business involvement, to the outreach, to making sure we get more people involved. And I know that's hard to do, but that's what I think. Any other comments from up here? Councilor Egan.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, I guess, and I'm not going to repeat a lot of what was said. I agree with my fellow councilors about how we go about it. I just want to point out, I think this is our chance as the council to actually demonstrate leadership. That's what we get put here for, is to listen and lead the way. We have been listening. We have heard compelling data. But I think it's also really important to remember that progress is made from tripping and falling, and progress is made from making wrong decisions and then making another decision to make it right again. So I'm less concerned if it's 17% or 22%. Let's get the conversation going so that we can have everybody understanding it. The enormity of the challenge is such that if you're not in this, if you normally don't come across climate science in your daily work, the data can be extremely intimidating, and the gravity of the statements that are made by climate science advocates are really scary. And so it can be a turnoff. It can be very intimidating. And I think that's the wall we have to break to get to what Darrell was saying earlier about the people that are contacting him, and they contact me as well. why is the town going to take away this or do that? And I think that's the compelling argument that we're making. This is not the town hitting somebody over the head with, you have to meet this. This is the town showing we all on this planet have to get to these targets. We all have to start working on reducing these greenhouse gas emissions. And whether it's 20% or 40% of whatever variable you're talking about, that's much less important than getting people involved in the conversation so that they can find out in some small way what they can actually do. And I think that's why we should be bold and not be afraid to revise the goal in 5 years or 3 years when we find out it was too high, or we accomplished it and maybe we thought it was too low, or whatever the dynamic might be. The point is we get folks into the conversation and we get to the place where everybody can start to pull apart and get down to small things that they can do, which is why I was so excited about the Electrify Everything. That's a small thing. People can trade in their gas-powered lawnmower and get a battery-operated lawnmower. No, that's not going to save the planet. That's not going to save Greenland from melting and contributing 10 inches of sea level rise. But you can feel like you're doing something, and then maybe you're going to be interested in doing something else. And that collective effect, I think, is what our job is, to start pulling that forward again for our community.
So thank you, John. I think we've heard from everybody. Unless anybody wants to add something, I think we're ready to vote on this. So I'll make a motion, be it ordered that the carbon reduction limits set out in the memo from Meddy Smith dated August 24th for the town of Freeport be adopted.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Egan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So that's 4-2 with Fournier and Lawrence opposed. So that motion carries. We have new greenhouse gas emissions targets for the town of Freeport. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to everybody who's been working on this and for coming out tonight and speaking in support of it. And I'll offer the same reminder I did to the mooring folks. If you do want to discuss, if you wouldn't mind moving closer to the front door or moving outside, that would help us. Next up, we have discussion around a fire truck. This is to consider action relative to an agreement with the town of Yarmouth to house Engine 1 and to allow them to utilize the apparatus while we search for a buyer. I'll invite our fire chief up to the podium to give us some background on this.
I have an update for
And
you.
I'll go after or before? Okay.
We'll see if it's needed.
Okay.
Probably.
Okay.
Nice job. It's a little loud out there.
Yeah.
So, good evening, folks. Little background on that is a few weeks ago I was up here and we approved the bid to sell tank truck. So part of the aspect is our old Engine 1 is sitting outside right now, and we're kind of going, we've sent that out for bid, got no bids. We're assessing opportunity to, re-advertise it, but also too is looking at a broker and what kind of operational that might be as far as trying to, dispose of that asset. In the meantime, Town of Yarmouth Fire Department reached out to me and inquired if they could take and willing to store it for us, so it's outside of the environment, and I'm a big proponent for doing that sooner than later. But also too is that they're down an engine, and they would take care of it as far as cover the insurance, cover all the stuff, truck checks and stuff, be responsible for maintenance of it while it is in their care, and to be utilized for second due engine mutual aid aspect for it. So they're very willing, and the support of the fire chief, the town managers come through. So we're looking for approval. Basically, Caroline's worked with town attorneys, so we're waiting for a memorandum of understanding, drafted by the attorney to do that. But I would like to be able to move forward with this.
Anything Caroline has an update on that?
Sure. So I did get an email today from Nat Tepper, the town manager in Yarmouth, and this is something that he confirmed that they are interested in doing, and they understand they would need to do certain things. So we did send the draft to one of our town attorneys to look at, and they did raise some good points of things that we might want to just add to this to be really clear on. Can Yarmouth use it for anything, or can Yarmouth only use it for mutual aid calls? Well, the understanding is that Yarmouth will house it and they can use it as needed. It could be mutual aid calls or it could be other things. They thought we should clarify that either of us could end this at any time, which is a good catch, because if we have the opportunity to sell that, I think that is the preference of the town. They thought we should put some clarification, which Yarmouth agreed to, that they are going to be taking care of the limited equipment that is on it, and that Yarmouth should be responsible for any damage that occurs. There was a question on insurance. I don't think we've checked. Have you checked with our insurance carrier?
They're insured by the same of us. Historically, we've done this agreement with Durham, and the insurance was in place.
Yeah, so I think we kept Durham on our policy, which is what I think we would have to do in Yarmouth. So I guess one question that our attorney raised is, so if we're going to be insuring it but housing it there, do we want to pass the charge of insuring it while it's there onto the town of Yarmouth? So there are some details to work out in writing. If the council's okay with those remaining details working out, then I think you could authorize it. If you do want to see the final draft with those changes incorporated, then we'd table it and bring it back to you on the 17th.
It says in the memo from Yarmouth that Yarmouth, we would take full responsibility of insuring and covering all vehicle repair costs.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We would have to confirm that. I mean, one of us is going to insure it. Before, we kept it on our policy. Since we are the owners of the vehicle, our attorney did flag that. He didn't think that our carrier or their carrier would insure something that they don't own, but we definitely need to work that out. It needs to be insured, and so I guess the question is, if we keep it on our policy, do we want to charge Yarmouth for that?
Yes. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yes. Yeah. They can cover the cost even if it's our insurance. Councilor Fournier, then Councilor
Just a little history. When we took our rescue to Durham, they did pay to insure the vehicle. I think we're getting pretty petty if we're going to go out and start saying, if they're going to insure it, because they're going to put it in a heated garage. They're going to keep the vehicle going, which is going to make it more saleable for us. So I think we want to think this through very thoughtfully before we, have any cost over to them. I think we're getting the better end of the bargain. So this is something. Not only did we do it in Durham, but many, many years ago, under a previous chief, that we had a truck that was used by, I believe it was Pownell. They had a truck down, so it's something that has been done in the past. I think it's great that we can get it out of the weather, get it over there, keep it running, keep it maintained and usable. All that's going to do is add value to it, and I hope we don't kill this deal by saying that, we got to charge them for something that really probably is not a lot.
Councilor Bradley and then Councilor Pillsbury.
Yeah, I guess with no history at all, look at this and I look at the big town of Yarmouth, and we're saving them the money of going out and buying a new truck. And I guess my question is, have we asked them to pay us anything for the use of this truck? Have we offered to sell them this truck? Have they offered to buy it? If those conversations about transfer of ownership and equity gone on, or are we just responding to, a handout, help us because we're your neighbor?
I believe they've basically gone out to bid for a truck replacement. This kind of presented as an opportunity to fill a gap that they have. Essentially, they're in a position is that they really, can't offer really mutual aid beyond one engine at this point, and that leaves their community vulnerable with that. So that it was just kind of a win-win situation that presented itself. Long term is that truck is, not in their eyesight as far as purchasing for the long haul.
So what we're getting is a mutual aid partner, because we're giving them the equipment that they can use to provide mutual aid to us and other communities.
Correct. And secondly, I mean, the biggest little history lesson here is that an ambulance we needed to sell a number of years ago. And it sat out back and for all winter, and we basically lost value on it rather than trying to sell it outright. And basically, as we're coming into the fall and winter season, I don't really want to be in that position as far as, going out, shoveling it out, moving it around the parking lot for snow removal and so forth. The other aspect of it is it's not going to get used and exercised, and so things start to seize up, freeze up, and the value will diminish. So two things I see is that we get to store it in their station, it's heated, it's protected. If we take and decide, we get an offer to sell it, the deal is over, and basically we come back to the council, get the approval for that sale, and it's a done deal. They get to use it as a supplement vehicle. If their fire engine goes down for current one for repairs, then they can utilize that in town and provide some fire protection. So I hope that answered your question.
It does. Thank you, Chief.
Councilor Pillsbury?
Do we know what the cost is to insure a vehicle like that for a year? And do we also know the cost of what it would cost to store in a heated, covered garage for a year?
I'm sorry, I wouldn't be able to answer what, a cost to the insurance side of that, for that at this point. As far as, storage fee, I couldn't answer what their heating costs and stuff. All I know is that they've got a couple open bays.
I mean, my point being that it's probably a wash. So do we want to protect our asset and also help out a community? I mean, I think we should find out what the cost is, but I'm not going to squabble over a small amount of money between a neighboring community. If it was $1 million to insure it for the year, then I think we have to have a conversation. But so I don't know. That is a piece of information that I would like to know. But my sentiment is that if it's a relatively minor cost, especially compared to the protection for the equipment, I wouldn't worry about it.
It wouldn't stop me. I also don't need to negotiate against ourselves. They've already offered to pay and cover the cost of the insurance, so I think it's just easy to say, sure. Yes.
Yeah, I think it really is. I mean, they said they can put it on theirs. Is the insurance carrier really going to do that, or are we going to have to keep the insurance like we did when we give it to Durham to use?
And I assume they would then reimburse us for the cost of the insurance if they can't put it on there.
Or most of it, or something like that.
Yeah.
I think we can delegate that to
Yeah,
them.
I don't
Thank
know
you.
what the
That's
cost
just what I was going to say. We got a good acting manager who will cover us.
That's where I think we're all going, right? So, Daryl, do you want to make this motion? Or, do you have more to add, Chief?
Just a quick question as far as is that my desire would be like to be able to move that down into Yarmouth tomorrow and put it in their station.
That's giving me heartburn.
Yeah.
And not to be utilized until this is all agreed upon.
I'm guessing we probably need to have the.
I would advise
agreement
against
first,
that. I think
right?
we need to have that memorandum of understanding in hand, which we won't have till tomorrow. We need both parties to sign it, and we need to make sure that this is going to be insured before it leaves the town of Freeport. It's too big of a risk to let out without that in place. I think we could execute it really quickly once we resolve those two things, but I feel strongly that we need those in hand before we turn the truck over out of our possession, because for some reason, if that made it not covered, we'd have a big problem.
That's why I'm never going to be a town manager.
Daryl, do you want to do the honors?
No, I'm ready to vote.
Yeah. Do you want to read the motion? Yeah.
Read the order. Okay, thank you. Be it ordered that the town of Freeport entered into an agreement with the town of Yarmouth to house Engine 1 and to utilize the apparatus while we search for a buyer. Be it further ordered that the town manager be authorized to sign an agreement on behalf of the town council.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Lawrence. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 6-0. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Make sure they don't paint it. Oh, it's over there.
No, they're going to put an E1 on the front bumper.
If they could paint it like pink sparkles, I'll let it go tomorrow. Just
You
saying.
won't find it in the Sparkle Parade.
Just as long as they don't scrape off the town of Freeport on the side of it.
I know, right? Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We have one more item, but in light of the workshop that we held with the Shellfish Commission before our meeting, I think the intent was that we would table this and bring it back on a future agenda. So I'll make a motion to table item 161-23.
Second.
Date to be determined. Thank you, Councilor Egan, for the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Were you guys in favor, Lawrence, Bradley?
Yeah.
In favor of tabling? Yeah, okay. 6-0, that carries.
Great.
All right, so
Been waiting for this.
we are on the discussion of the Great Race 2024, Manager Pelletier.
So I will give you the boring manager update, and then I'd like to invite Susan Nurse up to the podium to tell you about the real excitement. So Sue had reached out to us about a desire to explore closing Main Street for an afternoon on a day in June as the Great Race comes through Freeport. So we had a preliminary meeting. We had Susan, we had some representatives from the chamber, we had the town engineer, public works superintendent, police chief, I can't remember, I think Paul had to step out that day.
No DPW, but yes to the fire and police.
Okay, so we had a meeting just to talk about this, but to close Main Street because it's a state road, the request would need to come through the town, and we need to have that town engineer work on a request because he needs to submit some kind of engineered drawings, which I use that term loosely because they've been pretty easy to work with in the past. But before we put a lot of time, really staff time into this, we wanted to bring it to the council to see if it's an idea they support the town pursuing on behalf of this event. And I cannot do the event justice, so I would like to turn it over to Sue to tell you about the event and about what it could bring for people to the town of Freeport just before the peak season kicks off for our tourists.
Okay, so the Great Race is not really a race, it's a rally. And we're, my partner and I, Peter Brown, have been part of it for about 5 years. The race is going to start next year in Owensboro, Kentucky, and end in Maine. And this is the first time next year that they will have 3 nights staying in one state. In fact, staying in one set of hotels. And Peter Prescott, who is the owner-operator of EJP up in Gardner, is a huge proponent of Maine and has contacted the director of this race and said, we need to have it come to Maine, we need to highlight Maine, and so on the 28th of June 2024, they've decided that that's the day it will come to Maine. So on that day, the Great Race will be already have left Kentucky and be in Providence, Rhode Island, have stayed overnight in Providence, Rhode Island. Then we'll travel to Loudon, New Hampshire, and then for the evening group, we'll be at Freeport. What happens is there's 120 cars, approximately, and they don't start in a line of 120 and go. What happens is that each team of navigator and driver get a set of instructions, and every navigator driver gets the same instructions, and we start 1 minute apart. So if the start time is 7 o'clock, the first team leaves at 7:01 because they're number 1, the next leave at 7:02, 7:03, so you sit hypothetically on the side of the road and see 2 hours of antique cars, all older than 1974, driving by you in a parade. And then when they get to a lunch stop, they're all parked so that people can come out and see them and sit in them and touch them and ask questions about them. And meanwhile, the people that are navigating and driving the cars are having lunch. Then we get back in the car and go off to the dinner spot, which is what Freeport would be that night. So the road closure we're asking for is from 3 in the afternoon so that the Great Race people can set up their inflatable finish line, if you will, and get the streets ready for the cars to come. And then when they start showing up, one by one, every minute, they will park on the street and present a car show to people of Freeport. So it'll be 120 cars parked on Main Street for 2 hours, and people will come from all over the place. I mean, the participants in this race come from Japan, Australia, England, Canada, primarily the United States, but they do come from all over the world. And there are prizes. Each team could win $5,000 a day. The purse at the end is a $50,000 prize. So there is a challenge to each team to come in at a 0 score. So everybody gets these instructions, and they leave the start line and get to the finish line in exactly a time. Like there's a race person who sets up the whole course, and he knows exactly how long it takes you to get from this course, this section to that section. So it's like golf. The closer you are to 0, the better the score is. And if you have a score over the 9 days of competition, the winner this past year was less than 2 minutes of error. Over 9 days, 2,300 miles, which is an incredible feat. Driving sometimes, like there's a 1918 American LaFrance fire truck that's been changed into a speedster. There are cars that, there's all different collection of cars. And you may have seen me driving around in the car that we have. It's a Model A Ford with a boat tail, wooden boat tail back on it. So anyway, I could talk for a long time about this. I'm sure there's some questions, but I'll do my best.
Councilor Fournier.
So they shut down at 3. What time would the event end to?
The cars would leave at 8 o'clock to go to Augusta. So
8 p.m.?
8 p.m.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, as I said, each night, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the cars will go out from Augusta and come back to Augusta. And so they're really promoting Maine for those 3 days. And the Kennebec Valley Chamber, as well as the Freeport Chamber and other groups, are really boosting it up. I don't know if you saw the paper on Saturday, but there was an article about the Great Race in the paper on Saturday, just talking about it in general. And so there's a lot of energy around having this event come to Maine. Yes.
So are you going to block Beans, or would you go like from Nathan 9 up to?
It's a template that we've used before for
like when Beans did their
closing
birthday.
Yeah. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We're going to stick with what.
And that still would allow traffic flow.
Sure.
In and out of Beans, so we wouldn't really be taking away from Beans at that point, because that was done for the 100th or whatever it was. So
100th anniversary.
That's been thought out, and that was a good plan executed. I think it's cool. Thank you.
Councilor Lawrence.
Yes.
Well said. I like short comments.
Okay.
So it would be Friday afternoon from 3 o'clock to 8 o'clock is when the street would be closed?
Yes. Yeah.
And roughly from where to where?
Probably focused on, like Councilor Fournier said, Nathan Nye area to School Street, with like a soft closure at Howard Place, because the cars, the rally cars have to get through, but then there'll be other people that will want to get around Howard Place parking lot behind Beans. And they're expecting spectators. I mean, at each stop, they estimate somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 people just for this event. And then often there's other car clubs like the British Invasion or the Corvette Club or the Model A Club that bring their cars, and they're on display as well as the Great Race cars.
Is that enough room for 120 cars from Nathan Nye to School Street?
The race director has already come to Main Street and kind of scoped it out, and definitely, yeah, they park diagonally and.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure you'll figure it all out. I mean, yeah, it's obviously a clear yes from me. And so what you're looking for tonight is just, should we direct the town to spend energy on making this happen, and then you'll come back later?
Yeah, so I mean, they would need standard things, special event permit, they need to pay for a police detail. I think last time we closed Main Street, we had to do some kind of outreach to property owners to allow for public input. So we have time, but we would need to do all that. So it's really like, is this an idea the council's open to?
Yes.
If so, I will take that as the go ahead, let's pursue this, start drawing stuff up and submitting something to DOT and doing outreach. If we do have to hold a public session, we might bring it back to you to give the public the opportunity to comment. Because again, I do think we had to do that when we closed it during COVID.
Yeah, I think we need to sign something at some point.
We just wanted to go ahead.
Yeah.
We pull this off well next summer, then it can say on the 2025 race, Owensboro, Kentucky to Freeport, Maine, and we can be the destination.
Right, they can stay here for 3 nights instead of in Augusta.
We have a lot more hotels in Gardner.
Just one other question. Do they bring like food trucks or anything in too that really make it kind of cool?
They don't. The race doesn't, but they've been in contact and that's why I'm part of it, because I'm the connection for Freeport. Obviously, each town that they go to, they try to find somebody, like the chamber. Sometimes they talk to the librarians, try to get people to contribute to this. So, yeah, there'll be food.
Yeah. People will eat. Awesome. Fun. Thanks for bringing it to town, Sue. I think it's a great idea. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks. I'll be watching for you as I drive. Usually what they do is they have the hometown car go through the finish line first as if we were winning the race. We're not that good, but it looks like we are. So our car will probably be the first one as it comes under the arch in Freeport.
Is it negative time if you finish before your time?
Oh, well, it adds up. It's not, doesn't diminish.
It just keeps it.
It just, yeah. So if you're a second early or a second late, it's 2 seconds off. So, yeah, it's tricky. I'll show you the instructions if you're interested.
Can you join
anyway,
the
thanks so much. No helicopter.
No helicopter?
Thanks so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. I appreciate it. Thank you for sticking around so long, too.
Oh, sure.
I'll make one more motion, and then I'll suggest we take a 5-minute break. I would make a motion to consider action relative to an executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA Section 4056A pertaining to a personnel matter. We'll have Baker Tilly present to discuss the town manager search. So based on that, I would move we move into executive session.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Lawrence. Councilor Pillsbury.
Aye.
Fournier.
Yes.
Councilor Lawrence.
Yes.
Councilor Bradley.
Yes.
Councilor Egan.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So we're in executive session. We'll start with a 5-minute break.
And we won't be going back into public session
We
tonight?
will not be going,
Okay.
I don't anticipate going back into public session tonight.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Chalmers.
Hey, Chalmers, can you add me to your list? Can you add me to your list? Your newsletter.